Be a senior this year. I wanted to be here tonight to ask you all to let us play football. I have played sports since I was 6 years old. I am a three-sport athlete, having played football, baseball, and basketball throughout high school. This all abruptly ended on March 15th, and we lost our baseball season. To no longer have a practice to go to, a team to work out with, and friends that supported you each season has been hard on a lot of us. For most of us, we are used to being able to be kept busy and practicing every day of the week, and for that to stop abruptly has caused many of us to feel helpless because we have no control over our future. We miss working together as a team and holding each other accountable. Thankfully, we have BFS and captains practices to try to work out together, but it has just been a time of such uncertainty that you feel at any moment even that will be taken away. If you don't approve a season for us this year, I don't know what we will do. Playing our senior year is everything. From when we were little to now, all you think about is getting a chance to be the team leaders, the ones that push the younger athletes and help them to get better for your team. Having played since 4th grade, I can't help but feel that every practice and game has led and prepared me for my senior year. To not have the option to play and find out just how good I think we can be is emotionally and physically draining. As Jackie Robinson once said, life is not a spectator sport. I want my life back, and we want to play. Thank you.
Thanks, Connor.
Thank you.
Quinn Faust is our second person.
Okay, my name is Quinn Faust, and I will be a senior this year as well. And as my brother said, we have played sports since we were 6 years old. So in fact, we didn't know anything like this. We haven't had this much time off, and we just moved from sport to sport. So not because we had to, just because we wanted to. And here's our identity. Our closest friends all around us, they did the same thing. They just played sports and hung out. So sports are just so much more than football or just basketball. It held us accountable and gave us things to do to fill our time. A goal to work towards something special for our team. We strive to be good people on and off the field, and to respect our coaches, parents, and community members. To no longer have the attachment to something has been hard. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to motivate myself to work out or to set any goals without being able to look forward to a season. I know this is a challenge, but I trust that we can do this. We can safely practice, mask up, social distance, and work out as a team. I know so because so far my teammates and I have followed all the safety protocols necessary to avoid an outbreak. In BFS, we practice social distancing and wore masks. And in our 5-contact football practices, we distance ourselves throughout the 100 yards and constantly use hand sanitizer on the balls and on our hands. This was not easy, but it just shows the lengths we would go to just to have any sort of season. My teammates and I need sports, and I hope you'll give us a chance to play our final season as seniors, especially with our beautiful new turf field. But thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Next is Ethan Meyer. Hey, Ethan, right on the X.
You guys hear me okay? All right. Hello, my name is Ethan Meyer. I'm a senior here at Lodi High School. I'm a student athlete participating in 3 sports, football, basketball, and track. I'm here today to speak about a decision you have tonight regarding football. The decision to allow me and the rest of my brothers to have a football season. For the majority of us, it will be our final year playing football for Lodi. I want to help, represent, and be a voice not only for our team, but what I consider my second family. Starting with the BFS program. We have maintained, followed all guidelines put in place that allow us to continue to work out and prepare for the upcoming season. Our coaches from the start made us aware of the guidelines and proper steps that we had to follow, and us as players did so. We recently had contact days last month. All the while following the WIA and health department guidelines, us as players know what is at stake and we follow them strictly. As a team, as a brotherhood, we are ready. Guidelines have been put in place and we have complied. Based on the recent WIA meeting that took place last Friday, we are ready to play and they're ready for us to play. In my short life, I never thought I would have to stand here today from my elected school board pleading for myself and my team to be able to play our last season, my senior season of football. Something that we've always dreamed about. Always looking forward to that, having our one last homecoming game. Always looking forward to having our one last home game, our own very senior night. Nevertheless, one last chance to make memories of my second family, my brotherhood, on the field. I ask that you all do the right thing and allow us to play. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Colliard's next.
Good evening. Because of the recent events, obviously, of last night's ruling by the Capital Conference, some of these things I'm going to read may be outdated, unfortunately, but I want to make sure we spent some time, my wife and I, who wasn't able to be here because of work. But I want to make it on record, again, the importance of the sports that these kids have to play. So, I'll get started. Well, my wife and I, again, would like to implore you to please vote to allow all fall sports to take place in the fall. Obviously not so much anymore. Not just the lower contact ones. Lodi School Board has consistently reiterated that your number one priority is your commitment to the health and well-being of the students of Lodi schools. Your vote tonight in favor of all fall sports, now in this case, football, is an opportunity to show that commitment, and my wife and I would have liked to explain why. National Federation of State High School Associations, in association with WIAA, cites many reasons why extracurricular activities are so important in a young person's life, such as learning self-discipline, building self-confidence, achieving higher grade point averages, improving self-image, maintaining a healthy weight, and becoming productive members of society, just to name a few. Of course, a major thing that we felt about this was that children that are being now, we are being at home with online school are going to be largely inactive throughout their school day, sitting in front of their Chromebook doing their homework. This is going to be taking place day after day, week after week. Any of you who have children that were in online school, which I know some of you have, we are trying to find constant ways to keep them active each day. Having them participate in sports is a positive way of contributing greatly, again, to their physical needs of our students. A positive outlook or outlet helps remove some of the stress of online school or school in general, of course. It's a reason that came directly from our son, who, like many other students, experienced many challenges with online learning. It allows them to have something to look forward to and participate in. It gives them a way to burn off stress and be part of a community of others who are facing the same struggles they are. Morale is low from people I speak to, from my children, from their friends. They need to be part of this experience. Voting for all fall sports to take place in the school board gives the school board a unique opportunity to build the children of our community back up. Again, there's risks, and this, I guess, will be portrayed into the spring. My biggest concern is that this will be coming out of winter. I don't think this virus is going anywhere. Obviously, you're doing everything you can to mitigate the risks. My opinion of doing fall sport is we're coming out of summer and then going into winter and then coming out of winter into spring. We're going to be looking at a potential to knock them down again and not allow them to play at all this year. And I think that would be a horrible blow. Try to skip a little bit of this that I was going to read. Again, we want to be able to make choices for our own children. If parents don't want their kids to be playing in sports, let them choose, and let us choose to put our kids in sports. Speaking with my son, the important thing, at least majorly for the soccer team, which he plays in, and I would assume my daughter, who's a volleyball player, is that they have teams to play against that are similar to theirs. And if everything goes to spring, it's likely that hopefully that'll happen. My concern is the abuse that their bodies may take on hard ground. I know we've got the turf, but where is everybody going to practice? Leg injuries, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of the boys play spring soccer, so they know what cold is like, but you know, right now, I guess we don't have a choice. Who are they going to play? One final thing I'd like to say that I think is important. We think that we need to also remember something that's taking place here is truly amazing. All the petitioning and protests, all the speaking up before you guys to the school board, all the turmoil taking place in our community is taking place because our community is filled with students who deeply desire to attend school and be involved in school activities. This is a tremendous gift that has been given for all of us, where other schools might struggle with dropout rates or truancy, just a lack of general interest in school and school-related activities. Lodi is different. Our children just want to get back to school and sports. How thankful we all should be for that. Let us not ever take that for granted. Don't dismiss the value of that attitude in our children when considering how to vote on these issues. Thank you for your time and the consideration to what we have to say in the case that we have presented in favor of false, well, I'll say football in this case, or fall sports to take place on behalf of the mental, physical, and social health and well-being of our children. Follow through on your commitment to the health and well-being of our community, and make the vote in favor of sports this year. These kids are relying on us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the next person is Logan Walzer.
Said we need our shuttle to show.
Just trying to make sure that one person goes out before the other one comes in.
Hey, Logan, right to the X. Perfect, thank you.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Logan Walzer, and I'm a class of 2017 graduate from Lodi High School. I understand that there's a great deal of pressure with the decisions that you all have to make during these times, and I understand that there are risk complications to either side of an argument. But I'm here today to speak about why I believe there should be in-person education and sports for the kids of the Lodi community this fall. My arguments are based on my personal opinions, facts, guidelines set forth by the CDC and WIA, and decisions made by the majority of schools, both rural and in cities, in this county, our conference, and state. I feel like I represent the majority of student athletes and their parents, as 75% of parents have voted in favor of having some sort of in-person education this fall. I was a three-sport athlete at LHS. I played in state championships for all of those sports. I was a salutatorian, WIA scholar athlete, and a state champion. I had an amazing experience at LHS, and I owe it all to you guys, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I'll be graduating in May from the UW-Madison School of Business and Finance and Real Estate. The reason I say all of this is because if I was one of your students today, I don't think I would have been any of those things based on the decisions that have been made to not have in-person education or sports. This should scare you more than COVID. I want to take a moment and have everyone go back to the fall of 2019 and just think back to that time and ask yourself this question. What do you believe the most essential occupations are? And I think all of us in this room would agree that teachers are by far in our top 3, if not our number 1. Yet during the past few months, we have decided that in-person teaching is non-essential. But all other in-person occupations, such as construction workers, waitresses, factory workers, all of these occupations that require in-person are essential. And they have returned to work, and they've done it successfully with certain protocols. How is this, and why can't we do this? There's nothing more essential than our teachers and our students. I know the focus of this meeting is on sports, but I'm really passionate about in-person teaching, so I want to focus on this for a minute. I would have, without a doubt, failed my first semester of college at UW-Madison without Mr. Pertzborn. His teaching style, his coaching style in the classroom that he brought every day in the classroom is what made him so great. And it just cannot be replicated through a video screen or a virtual session. My entire experience at Lodi was great, from learning to read, write, and speak at the college level from Ms. Potter to financial literacy with Mr. Hauser. All of these things set me up to be successful. And the list goes on as well. This school's demand for excellence in the classroom, on the field, on the court, in the theater, in the community, all of these things is what makes us such a special place. No sports and no in-person learning could possibly destroy these students and this community. This should scare you more than COVID. And now I want to focus on sports. So specifically football. One example is Coach Bowles and the entire coaching staff. Amazing people, and they have an ability to take 70 young student athletes and have them work together towards a common goal. This remarkable effect not only helps these players be great people, but also our community. The percentage of risky behavior that would lead to code violations for players such as underage drinking, academic dishonesty, substance abuse, were all, to the best of my knowledge, near zero when Coach Poles had our full attention and our full understanding that football's a priority, school's a priority, and our health is a priority. For some kids, it takes having sports, a code of conduct, structure, to shy away from these types of negative effects. And these all can arise due to isolation and boredom. Aside from the athletes, the sense of community that Lodi has is so strong. Watching Friday Night Lights is unmatched. There's a positivity that you can feel through the halls of every single school in this community. This goes for every sport, not just football. There's a ripple effect that all sports have on this Lodi community that cannot be taken away from these students and teachers. The effects of not having sports should scare you more than COVID. Finally, I hope there's an understanding that if there's no in-person education or sports, there will be repercussions far worse, far deadlier, and much longer lasting than any sickness. Underage drinking and substance use will increase substantially. I was a student that chose to personally not drink in high school for a variety of reasons. If I didn't have sports, a code of conduct, structure, and classes that required me to be present, like these kids have had for 6 months and are going to continue to have with the plan in place, if I'm honest about it, who knows what could have happened, and I too could have fallen into that trap. Due to isolation and boredom and depression, these things are going to be on the rise. I've seen it firsthand with 2 fellow Badger classmates and friends of friends that have committed suicide since March. As a recent graduate looking out for my community, I promise you that there are issues far greater than sickness that come from no in-person learning in sports. That should scare you more than COVID. There's going to be a need for a much stronger plan to handle these sorts of life-altering negative events and habits that shutting down schools and not having sports are going to have, than trying to figure out how to wear a mask, when and where to socially distance, and how to sit people properly. And I know it's not just that easy, and that's part of the plan that we're putting in place, and that COVID really does present a real threat, but we can't let the solution be bigger than the problem. My fear is making a decision to not have in-person education or sports will lead to a far worse outcome. If the decision stands to have fully online learning and virtual sessions, sports will become an even more essential part of our students' lives. In my opinion, the board should be focused less on the decision to have sports, but on how to have sports. Your coaches want to coach, the players want to play, and the parents of the players want them to play. The WIA and CDC have provided a roadmap on how to do this safely. Give these families and their student athletes the opportunity to decide if they want to compete. Please don't make the decision for them. I'm grateful to be a Blue Devil, and I'm proud to have grown up in this community. I hope you, the Board of Education, allow for these student athletes to have that same opportunity in a safe way. Thank you.
Thanks, Logan.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thank you.
Jaden Kalinsky is next.
Hi, my name is Jaden Kolinsky, and I am currently a senior and also a three-sport athlete. I came here tonight on behalf of the high school volleyball program to express my concerns to you regarding the decision made on fall sports. This summer has not been the summer I had envisioned before my senior year. No volleyball or basketball leagues during the week, which led to no runs to Walmart to get snacks with my teammates, and no trips to Culver's after. The lack of sports has created a huge disconnect for my friends, teammates, and coaches. And as an athlete, these are the very things that keep me grounded, focused, and driven. To say that it has been a hard summer, socially and emotionally, is a huge understatement. My one bright spot has been my AAU basketball season. My team was able to play in July and August tournaments, not just across the state, but in other states playing against teams across the nation. We had a total of 26 games over 5 tournaments in Des Moines, Waukesha, Appleton, and Minneapolis. We played against teams from California, Arizona, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, and Wisconsin. Was it like a typical AAU tournament? No, it wasn't. But with guidelines in place, I was able to play in a safe environment with no issues. I'm here to tell you that it can be done, even with a high-risk sport such as basketball. So masks were required of all spectators and players and coaches when not playing. Hand sanitizer stations were at every corner. The number of spectators was limited. Social distancing of spectators was enforced. Every person had their temperature taken before walking into the building. Between each game, everyone was expected to clear out so the workers could sanitize the bleachers and the bench. After each game, everyone on my team would sanitize their hands and we would exit the gym. My teammates, coaches, and parents felt safe at all these venues. And to be able to play with my 7 teammates for my final AAU season is something that I will cherish forever. It's no secret that sports play a huge role in my life. I consider sports the biggest classroom there is. Sports teach about teamwork, success, failure, adversity, and most importantly, about friendships. These friendships that are created during the season are carried out on and off the court. Some of my best memories with my teammates are in the locker rooms before big games or on a long bus ride to an away game. All little things we do together during the season are lifelong memories. I know it won't be easy, but we, as athletes, will help in any way we can, and I please ask that you consider keeping all fall sports for Lodi. We, as athletes, will follow all guidelines and restrictions as we just want the chance to play. And we appreciate your concerns for keeping us safe. And as a senior, I want that last time in my jersey, my last time on the court, and my last hug from my teammates. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Coach Dave Poles is next. Run the X. Coach
Thanks.
Poles. Thank you, sir.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to read from a script because I tend to go on and on and on, so I don't want to do that to you guys. Hello, my name is Dave Poles, and I am the high school special education teacher. I'm a head football coach. I coach track and field as well. My wife Michelle and I have been in Lodi since 1996. We have 2 children in high school. I'd first like to say thank you to all of you for putting in a tremendous amount of time and effort and thought into the current situation. You have had to make very difficult decisions that affect every family in Lodi in a unique way. You have an unenviable task during this period of history, but it is a necessary one. There is undeniably no doubt that the education of our pre-K through 12th grade students is the most important consideration you have to consider and we have to consider daily as we navigate through this pandemic. In no way am I here to say sports is more important than education, because it is not. I am here to say that sports and co-curricular activities are a vital extension of our education system, and for some students, it is the motivating factor for their educational growth and success. I would like to express my support for all high school and youth athletics in our community. The kids and the coaches at every level of sport and co-curricular activity in Lodi are ready to get started when we can safely do so. These activities are vital to the physical and mental health of all of our Lodi students and for the soul of this community. The board will be discussing various options of sports seasons very shortly. There will obviously be calculated risk involved in whatever choice you vote on. Football is currently set to begin September 7th. If the board feels that we can safely start at that time, the Lodi football coaching staff is ready and willing to proceed. If the board does not feel that football can begin on September 7th, I would encourage you to consider the alternate season format for football to begin on March 8th and conclude on Friday, May 7th. This model allows every sport to have a scaled-down season, but at least it's some type of a season with the potential for a few games. This alternate season format will also take place on a date in the future that I am hopeful that there will be more rapid testing available and that we will have some form of vaccines available. At this point, it looks more and more likely that there will not be any conference championships, there won't be any playoffs, and there won't be any state championship games for any sport in the state of Wisconsin. Knowing that this is highly likely, the alternate seasons would not necessarily disrupt any other organization's goals in that regard. On behalf of the football program and other sports that I coach and other kids that I know and my kids, we simply want a chance for our student athletes to play and compete. Whatever that looks like, it looks like. If we get 2 games, great. If we get 7 games, even better. I want these seniors to have an opportunity to finish their sports careers in some fashion, even if it's just for a few moments. I want them to be able to play in the Lodi Stadium turf for the first time. I believe that we can find an option that allows our student athletes the opportunity to engage in these activities that have been an integral part of their life and education the entire time that they've been in Lodi. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have faith that you will find a way to give our student athletes a chance to play and compete. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dave.
Coach Zach Nelson is next.
Ready?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Hello. My name is Zach Nelson, and I am both an 8th grade language arts teacher and the varsity soccer coach here in Lodi. Education-wise, I support the board's decision to be virtual for Q1. It is important to be on the side of caution when an individual's health is in question. Sports-wise, soccer specifically, I know a few things that would help us have a successful fall season. Our athletes would follow all protocols set by the school board. Our parents are supportive and proactive individuals, and my staff would do everything in their power to make the practice and game environment as safe as possible. I'm sure all of the staff, coaches, and public would prefer to have soccer in the fall, but there are a few key reasons I believe the soccer season should be moved to the spring. The first reason is the Capital Conference has recommended that soccer teams move from fall to spring. Of the conference, 3 teams are still playing, but 5 are already moving their seasons to the spring. Or 4 or 5. The second reason is I do not believe we'll be able to get through an entire season in the fall with the likelihood of an outbreak. The third reason is the safer choice is to move the season to the spring. In conclusion, I care deeply about my players, and I know myself, my players, and the families involved with my program want a fall season. If the decision is for the season to be in the fall, we will do everything in our power to mitigate the risk that is involved because yes, there is a risk. It breaks my heart to say this, but I do believe the safer option is to move the boys' soccer season to the spring, though. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brady Ziegler is next.
Hi. All right, my name is Brady Ziegler, and I am one of the captains of the boys soccer team as well as a student athlete here at Lodi. Throughout the summer, multiple opportunities have been taken away from me. Both my school ball during the spring and my summer season in baseball have been taken away from me due to COVID. However, today I'm not here to speak for baseball. I'm here to speak on behalf of the soccer team and to say that we want to play this fall. We can assure you that we will follow all the guidelines given to us. As we had coaches practices earlier this month, and all the protocols were followed. And finally, as a senior myself and speaking for other seniors, we need this last moment together to make memories. Thank you.
Thanks, Brady.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Laverne Ziegler. What's next? Next.
Hello,
Hey, Laverne.
my name is Laverne Ziegler. I'm a parent of a senior student athlete. As a coach in this district since 1983, I went to school here. I coach here. I'm a parent here. I have children here. I know how important it is for kids to be part of a team. For some of these boys, it'll be their last time they'll be able to play soccer for Lodi. I understand there are risks involved in playing, but as parents, we allow our children to take risks every day, such as driving a vehicle. And where I live, it's deer country coming in, icy, snowy roads. They take chances every day, sometimes multiple times. I worry about the long-term effects of not being involved in sports, extracurricular activities, such as mental health, depression. Okay? And I believe the use of alcohol and drugs is on the rise. These kids have nothing else to do. As a coach, it's more important to have a structured practice or event rather than the boys just getting together on their own, which I think they did a lot this summer. Okay, if Coach Nelson, he's put together, showed and provided a safe environment for his players this summer during Coaches Contact Week and has submitted a plan to continue safe environment for his players. As a student, coach, and a parent in this district, I have a passion for caring for kids. So I want to ask you this question. All of you that were student athletes in high school, could I see a hand? Or involved in extracurricular activities. Okay, now imagine yourself not being able to participate. Or especially seniors not being able to be there that last year. The kids need this. Because who says if we go to the spring that we're going to be able to have a season? Thank you for your time. Oh, one more thing. I was an average student. I had wrestling and football. It changed my life. Some of these kids are average students. And I think they need this to keep them coming back. Thank you.
Thanks, Laverne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Berkholz, who is online.
Hi. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me do this. My name is Joe Berkholz. I'm the varsity girls tennis coach at our high school. I thought it was important for me to talk about how our season would be going if we decided not to have it. If we push tennis to the spring, that would be March 8th. That's not a feasible time to be having girls tennis. It's going to be too cold. The equipment's going to break down. Balls aren't really made to be played in that kind of weather. So I honestly don't think that if we end up doing this, I think it's important for you guys to know that essentially we're eliminating half our season, if not more, just due to weather itself. I understand that we're not really sure exactly how it's going to look going forward, but it is tennis is a sport where we're not together most of the time. We're able to give each girl 2 tennis balls when they go up to the court. They only touch theirs, they use their racket to give it to somebody else's balls back to them. So we don't need to share essentially any equipment when we're doing tennis. I also, I know the board is looking at singles versus doubles. I think that doubles is more than feasible to be having a doubles season this year along with the singles. Because I don't know how many of you played tennis before, but when you play doubles tennis, you're not supposed to be within 6 feet of each other. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong. And we have things in place to, if you need to go use hand sanitizer during a match, and if you do have to touch your partner, we can give them some hand sanitizer. They can take care of that kind of stuff. You gave us to go ahead and start practicing on singles. It's been going very well. The girls doing a very good job. They wear their masks to the courts. They put their stuff down by a pole around the fence. They're at least 9 feet apart from each other at that point. They are able to spread out across the courts. It's actually working very well. And I don't see how the additional doubles would affect any of that as far as like keeping their distance and stuff like that. And honestly, they're all having a good time. We've all been stuck inside a lot, and I think it's really good for sports in general. But I do think it's important for you guys to know that if we move to the spring, I don't see us having a season. At least maybe 3-4 weeks of it will be probably taken up by the weather. But I know this is hard and I appreciate it, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Joe.
Kurt Wilson is next.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting us begin practice. We've had 3 gorgeous days. I just want to mention that one of my middle school coaches, Phil Pake, his assistant, he came over to our house after the first practice, and he said, several of the kids came up to him and said, make sure to thank Coach Skellinger for allowing us to do this. We are so happy to finally be able to do something. As you can probably guess, I'm here to advocate sports options 2 or 3. I'd like to give some reasons. Cross country should move ahead with their seasons, address how we would handle meets, and address concerns some may have. One of the reasons we'd like to keep cross country in the fall is the weather. We are an outdoor sport. Being outdoors now is much more pleasant than dealing with ice, snow, and mud. It often takes a long time for our trails to melt in the spring. Also, some athletes mentioned that they have put in a lot of work this summer and are ready to have a competitive season after missing track last spring. Although I'd be fine with either 2 or 3. If you chose 3, it gives options for kids to participate in different sports. Such as soccer in the spring or any other ones that's moving. Also, I would like to mention that the last meeting, that I mentioned at the last meeting, is we have a schedule. Obviously, there's some holes in it now. From the very big meets have canceled or are going to scale back, but there's a WIA website that has people who want meets because some of theirs got canceled, and Portage has already mentioned that they'd be interested in having a dual meet with us sometime this season. Sorry about that. Now, the next reason might not seem that important to most people, but it is to me. If we have cross country in the fall, kids get to experience the sheer beauty of the fall season. You know, we go out on the trails and out in the country, and a lot of times, even a couple days ago, when we just went out Reynolds Road a little bit, I said, well, hey, don't be focused so much on the road. Take a look around a little bit. This is Lodi. You are very lucky to live here. Finally, as someone already mentioned, there's no guarantee that things will be better in the spring. So if we can do it in the fall, we should at least give it a shot. Now, you probably already heard 101 reasons not to have fall sports, and maybe we'll even hear a few more tonight. Now, I don't know how many I just gave you, but the ones I did aren't even the most important. I have 33 more important reasons to have fall sports, and those are the kids on my roster. While some may wonder how we can have sports but not face-to-face, I want to assure you that there are many who agree with the virtual but are in favor of letting the kids participate in sports. You may be wondering, how are we going to approach meets? Well, let me tell you what happens at a meet, because probably most of you have never been to a cross-country meet or know about cross-country runners. Most cross-country runners are introverts. That means when we get to the meet, they don't interact with other kids from other schools. They stick together with their team throughout most of the meet. Now, like they said, at the starting line, everybody has to get up there. So this year it'll be different. They will be spaced out, either by team or by individuals. The other time that they are together is the award ceremony. Well, there won't be award ceremonies this year. Awards, if there's awards, they'll be handed out to the coaches or mailed to the teams. Now, I guess we need to decide, since there are so many different guidelines out there, what guidelines are we going to use? I know one that gets talked about a lot is the 50 people maximum at an event. And if you went out to All Stop last night in the car show, there were hundreds of people out there. And if I went into Kohl's, I did go into Kohl's the other day, and it says COVID maximum 328. So on a big cross-country field, I think we can agree that 50 is a low number. Now, I sent Ms. Mefford some guidelines that were put out by the Louisiana High School Athletic Association. They were put together with the support of the National Federation of High School Sport, who was one of the people who said 50 at the beginning. They suggested staggered start, individual, team, or 25 runner starts. And we could spread 25 runners out easily across the end of the soccer field. Limiting spectators. They said 2 per athlete, okay? And we could designate where they would be, okay? And set up with some caution tape and say, hey, if you're a spectator, you can't be over by the finish area. You can't be, you know, right, there's a certain area where the kids come through where all the teams and all the fans congregate. Well, I would dictate, okay, teams, you got to spread out more, and we'll assign where they would be. They also said 30-minute breaks between races, so that when the group got done, their family and athletes could vacate the area before the next round began. And of course, masks, wearing masks at the start and at the finish, and have the kids with them. There was a big cross-country race down in Terre Haute, Indiana last Saturday. It had 28 schools. Now, we don't want to go there, obviously, but when they got done, the winner said, I put my mask on as soon as I got done because I want to do more of this. He said, and I just want to cover something that in your packet says that the WIA, as part of their list, said they strongly discourage multi-team events. And they went and revised that because they thought people were taking that out of context. They meant out of the area. So if we went back and double-checked, it would say, we strongly discourage events outside our area. So they were worried about baseball players going down to Florida for spring training. In cross-country, it was schools. A lot of Wisconsin schools go up to Minnesota to run what they call the GREAC meet that has tons of high school and college teams. I want you to understand that I I taught physical education for 30 years. And my favorite thing to teach was 5th grade gymnastics. And in gymnastics, you gotta take precautions. And you gotta have protocols. If a kid is gonna try a double leg cutoff on the parallel bars, you gotta make sure that they can do a single leg. And you gotta make sure they can do a hand walk. So there's step-by-step things, and if you're gonna do a handspring, we have to do a head spring first. And then you gotta do a head spring without help. And then you try a handspring with help, okay? So I'm used to making sure kids are safe. And I just want you to, I guess, put your trust in me and Ms. Mefford and Mr. Jelinek and Mr. Marshall to get together and say, hey, what protocols do we need for this race? What protocols, if when we go to another race, we need to find out, okay, how's it set up? If it's not set up the way we want it, we make a suggestion to change it. So I guess that's what I'm asking there. And last time I was here, I talked about someone who was a girl of ours who was hoping to have a chance to just practice. Her name is Claire Shinneman. If you could see her at practice, she is smiling from ear to ear when she is socially distanced. Yesterday, she turned her ankle, couldn't finish the workout. So I said, okay, just go back to your spot. They all have spots like 7 or 8 feet apart and do some stretching. And she was just smiling again. I said, well, we might be getting another girl to join our team. And she asked who it was, and I said who it was. And she said, that would be totally awesome. I named her captain, one of the captains this morning, because she has a can-do attitude. And you know, we talk and hear a lot about Lodi pride. She exudes Lodi pride. She reminds me of the first runner I had to go to state, and her name was Ann Detmer. And Ann made it to state her junior and senior years. She was a conference individual champion. She was 4-time MVP. And at the end of her career, I said to Ann, I'm going to have something for the newspaper because we were riding home from state on the bus. I said, what was the best part of cross country for you? And with all her accolades, she waited a few moments and said, all of it. I loved the practices just as much as the meets. Now, Claire's not going to go on and run for the Badgers like Ann did. She's just a very good runner. And we want, I guess I'm just asking to give her and her teammates a chance to experience, well, not all of it, but as much as they can this fall. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think
you.
Elizabeth Tenbarge is online.
Hello. Yes, hi. So I'm Elizabeth Tenbarge, and I am one of the graduating class of 2020 in this fall year. And I am also a student that in the past year have faced a lot of disheartening cancellations. My mock trial state was canceled, my forensics state was canceled, jazz dinner theater was canceled, my band concerts and band performances were all canceled, but all my graduation was canceled, and looking forward to college. My freshman year of college is about to be destroyed. But considering all of those things, I still look back at my senior year with happiness. I was still able, even with the whole epidemic and pandemic and everything going on, I was still able to enjoy myself and learn and have a good virtual experience. I was still able to get social distance parties with my friends and be able to enjoy my senior year. And like to remind the board that it's not, as it was a big deal for me in my senior year, looking back on all of the things that I was so upset about and disappointed about, I look back and I realize all of the good things that happened, and I tend to forget more of the negative feelings that I had towards the whole situation. So I would just like to remind the board that I am so thankful that all of my things in this past year have been canceled. And I know it sounds crazy, but I'm so happy that I'm safe and my family is safe and everyone that I know is safe from Corona. And I feel like the health and safety of the student and the board and everyone in Lodi is way more important than any sports or any of my events that could have gone on this year, or even my graduation. And if there's a way that we can have a successful sports season or a successful musical season or all of these things and still be safe about it, I feel like that is a great thing and we should go all for that. But if there's any chance that there could be any health risk or problems for any of our students, one sick life is too many. And thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
I believe that is it for public input. Yep, that's it for public input. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the public input. Can I get sorry, it's emotional to hear all that. Can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved, Shelley Pear.
Bill, second.
I have a motion by Shelley, a second by Bill to approve the agenda. We'll do a roll call. Bill?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
And Adam, passes 7-0. First on the agenda is the maintenance resignation.
Yeah, so this is pretty straightforward. Tony Sullivan, who's done a wonderful job for us, has taken on the building and grounds position in the Marshall School District. So I just asked the board to approve his resignation with appreciation for his service to the school district of Lodi.
I'll make a motion to approve Tony Sullivan's resignation from the district with appreciation for his service.
I will second. This is Angie.
So I have a motion by Steven and a second by Angie. Really miss Tony. Any further discussion?
Were you able to do an exit interview to find out if there was anything that we could have done different to have him continue here?
I have not. I can reach out to him and have that conversation with him.
Please do.
I know he's really wanted to be a building and grounds person, and so he's shared that with me even before I became in this position, that is his goal, was to be in that position.
Directorship.
Yeah.
I understand, but
Yes, I can follow.
sometimes you can find out things that we can improve in the
Sure.
future.
Absolutely.
That's all I've got, Adam.
Okay, thank you. Do a roll call vote. Bill?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
Adam, yes, passed 7-0. Next is co-curriculars.
Yeah, so when we met for our regular August 10th Board of Education meeting, we discussed co-curriculars. At that meeting, the board made a decision to let high school tennis, high school cross country, middle school cross country, and high school swimming start on Monday, August 17th. And swimming actually started today, or had their organization meeting today. But they decided to wait until the WIA Board of Control meeting on August 14th prior to making any decisions on athletics for this fall. The State Department of Health and Human Services had also promised some additional guidance on youth sports that the board was hoping for. I've shared the following documents with the board in their board docs, which can also be accessed by the public. The press release that came from the WIA Board of Control meeting on August 14th, a return to play document that was referenced a couple times tonight in public input, I shared that, and a statement from the Capitol Conference regarding fall athletics. I'm unable to share any guidance from the Department of Health and Human Services. The guidance that was being developed on youth sports has been pulled from the information that was being sent out to school, and there's no expectation at this point that the Department of Human Services will provide any guidance on youth sports moving forward. I've asked the high school administrative team of Joe Jelnick, Jason Marshall, and Sue Meffert to present some of the same information they presented last time, but then also incorporate this new information that we received from the WIA and other places moving forward. So I will turn it over to them.
Thanks, Vince. I think we're going to start with Sue. Jason and Sue put together a presentation on PowerPoint that you guys should see in front of you, plus some documentation that Jason put together. So actually, we're going to start with Jason, and then Sue's going to take it from there.
So really, this is just an overview. We try to take the WIA guidance that came out on Friday and break that down for you. We also added in there the NFHS risk levels that was a part of your packet last week. One of the things that is absent of the WIA considerations is that they do not follow that same risk level rating for sports. So theirs is just blanket considerations for all sports on how to best operate, but they don't follow that specific guidance. But we felt it was important to sort of pull from both of those places. Again, those are guidelines and considerations, but really our goal is to go through what has changed since our last meeting, talk about what the competition structure may look like for low-risk sports, talk about some of the considerations for high-risk sports, talk through some of the scheduling changes that the WIA came up with, and then present some options to you for moving forward. So with that, off to Sue.
All right, and I believe you can, the timeline is the second slide. So basically, the only thing that's kind of happened since your last board meeting was the WIA board control meeting. Our low-risk sports started practice, and then we had a capital conference decision that was made. We'll touch on those as we move along here. So the next slide, please. Out of the WIA board control meeting, they gave us some updated medical guidance related to COVID-19, as well as accommodations that we can use through our athletics related to COVID-19. A package of guidance for all fall sports. And then the biggest piece probably was the approval of the modified schedule for this current school year. So in essence, what's that look like? There's an option for fall sports for all schools that can play this fall. Then it would be followed by our winter seasons. Right after the winter season, which is shortened a little bit, they would add in another fall season for any school that wasn't able to compete in the fall or weren't able to get 50% of their season in the fall. There would be a shortened season for them running middle of February to middle of May, or early May. And then the fourth season would be a spring sports season for our traditional spring sports. So that would be like an April to end of June into early July schedule for them. If you go to the next slide, please. That is the statement here from our capital conference regarding the fall decision. So basically our capital conference is recommending to do fall sports seasons, which for this conference would be our volleyball, our tennis, our soccer, and our cross-country programs to the spring. However, all schools still have the opportunity to make local decisions on their fall sports. So if the school decides that it's safe for them to have fall sports seasons, schools can schedule independently. You could schedule against any teams that are also competing this fall. However, none of those games or competitions would count towards a conference championship or a conference record.
Sue, can I interrupt for just a moment? So the reason football is not on that is we are in a football-only conference starting this year. So there is a Capital Conference North football conference, and they are split about 50-50 about playing football this fall. We're waiting for Lodi to make a decision regarding football. It looks like Columbus is not going to play. Beloit Turner, Bigfoot is not going to play. Watertown Lutheran Prep and Watertown Lutheran Prep and Lakeside Lutheran are planning on playing. Lake Mills was planning on playing, but I believe they're meeting tonight to talk about going virtual at their high school level and probably postponing their seasons as well. Because Jefferson, I shared the board with the Jefferson County information, and it's been enacted. They had some emergency meetings this week to redo some things for their school. So that's just why football's not on there. So people may wonder, why is not football on that? The large capital conference that we're a part of for everything else does not, we're all kind of split off for football. We retain a lot of our capital conference teams, North teams, but it's a different decision. And we've had those conversations, but it's kind of split down the middle.
And that is also similar with swimming. Our swim team, girls co-op program is with the Badger Conference swim program, so that's not in that capital conference statement as well. The next slide is same as what we had in your packet from last time. So it's just showing the risk levels. This is all taken from our NFHS guidelines. So the low risk, moderate risk, high risk, and then numbers of people that they're saying could be involved in a phase 2 guideline where we're at right now. And as Mr. Marshall mentioned, the WIA has gone away from the risk levels in their new information they gave us. So instead they're looking to local guidance. They didn't give us guidance in that direction. And next slide, please. So again, that's the taking from the NFHS and also the Badger Bounce Back Plan. Our outdoor gatherings are limited to 50 people. And indoors are limited to 10 people. And then obviously masks required indoors, required outdoors when social distancing cannot be maintained. And then we wanted to put in that our busing right now is being limited to 24 students, which is 1 student per seat. And then we can go to the next one. Mr. John, I got a little bit.
All right, thanks, Sue. What I'm going to be talking about in the next 9 slides are basically the considerations by the WIA that they stated from that August 14th meeting. If you look at the document, there are a lot more details, so we've kind of generalized them on these slides. And the first one relates to competitions for low-risk sport. And again, the low-risk sports being girls tennis, boys and girls cross country, and swimming. A couple of things that actually have been brought up already, and you've heard from some of our citizens that have talked about, like considering only local single opponent, single day competitions, designating, and I'm not going to run through every single bullet because you can read it, but designating one coach to be responsible for COVID concerns. Our coaches right now have been doing that, so they've been screening their athletes before they come to practice in cross country and in tennis, and that seems to be pretty well. Records should be kept for all students present at practice, which they've been doing. Maintain social distancing for all players and coaches on sidelines. That would be for competitions. Follow local guidelines on limiting the number of spectators. Sue mentioned that as far as the NFHS recommendations, as far as what that would look like at an event, how many can be outside, how many can be inside. Require face coverings for personal coaches, participants. And then establish procedures for all venues to ensure social distancing. So if we get to the point where we're going to have competitions, we're going to have to start establishing those procedures. Next slide, please. More specifically, considerations for cross country, and again, I've talked about some of those in the low-risk sports already in the previous slide. But for instance, face coverings must be worn upon arrival at any time, and they need to be worn if you cannot social distance while you're running. For instance, if you're running by somebody, they have approved the whole idea of wearing a gaiter, which can easily be pulled up and pulled down when you're running by someone. I know Mr. Wilson, actually, our cross-country coach, mentioned something about staggered starts must be used, alternative finish line options. Monitors must be spaced around the course to ensure athletes are not running in packs, which could be difficult. And of course, we modify to minimize congestion, and then no award ceremony. So those are the considerations for cross-country, another low-risk sport by the WIA. Next slide, please. All right, swimming considerations. So we're obviously, swimming is going to be an indoor sport. Spectators would not be allowed until local guidance changes. So if we were to go with the NFHS recommendations, it would be 10 people in an area or an inside area. Increase water sanitation level to elevate chlorine level. Locker rooms, eliminate those whenever possible. Doesn't mean that we have to take them away altogether, but eliminate the use of those. Swimmers should wear a face covering up to the point where they are going to actually start a race and then immediately put it on when they finish the race. Scheduling adjustments should be made to reduce the number of events, duration, or number of participants present. And just like you would have in cross country, there would be no award ceremonies. So that's another low risk sport. And then finally, tennis is our last one. There are considerations for tennis. Spectators would not be allowed, again, similar to the other sports, until local guidance changes. One of the things that they would have to do is use 2 cans of tennis balls, give each player a different number of tennis balls. So in other words, visiting tennis teams would have to bring their own tennis balls and use those during a match. Our team would have to use their tennis balls during a match, so you'd have to number them or label them. So you're not touching another competitor's tennis ball, just to make sure that we're not using the same ones. Consider playing singles only. We talked a little bit about singles or doubles, but consider playing singles only, and again, that's a recommendation from WIA, and consider using every other court to maximize distancing. All right, so those are the low-risk sports. Here are the considerations for the medium and high-risk sports. So first of all, similar to what you have in the low-risk sports, masks should be worn whenever social distancing is not practical. This includes while playing moderate and high-risk sports of social distancing. We're going to talk more specifically about football and volleyball and soccer and what that's going to look like. Similar to the low-risk sports, you're going to have to make sure you're screening all your athletes before they come to practice. You're going to have to make sure you screen your athletes before competition. Right now, the school district is using a Google Form screening that every employee needs to do before they're in a building. They do that in the morning before they get here. So similar to that, a record should be kept of the people that are going to be at practice. Social distancing should be maintained to the greatest extent possible. And again, this includes coaches' talks, workouts, changing drills, and all those things. Other considerations for those medium and high-risk sports, bring your own water to practice, some obvious things that our low-risk sports are doing already. And then workout should be conducted in pods of students. So with the same 5 to 10 students always working out together. So that becomes a little bit more of a challenge for sports like football and some of the sports where kids are going to have to be closer together. All right, moving on to volleyball. Excuse me, I'm going to start with football. That's the next slide. The cloth face coverings can be worn underneath helmets. That's permissible, so that would be required. Athletes should refrain from moving mouth guards. So one of the things that is brought up in the WI recommendations is that if a mouth guard is removed on the sideline, you would have to disinfect your hands. If it's removed on the field, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. And then obviously those athletes would have to use hand sanitizer if that did happen. Obviously, do not share equipment. If locker rooms are used, social distancing must be maintained. And then one of the biggest pieces of equipment in football are footballs, so they should be cleaned and disinfected frequently. And then volleyball, another medium risk sport. Football is considered a high risk sport just because of the amount of contact you have in football. Volleyball is considered a medium risk sport. And it goes back to, again, face coverings during competition. It's very difficult for volleyball to maintain 6 feet, especially if you're up at the net and you're going against competition. You're not going to have kids that are 6 feet apart, so face coverings would be highly recommended. And again, it talks about some of the same things about not sharing equipment. Something specific to volleyball, side by side courts should be eliminated. So in many cases, we might have a JV team and a freshman team playing at the same time, which we wouldn't do. And then team huddles should be conducted using social distance guidelines, so they would have to spread out. If you've ever been on a volleyball match, they usually huddle up a lot during the match on the floor, but also in between games, so they would have to spread out and do that. In between games, we switch benches, and they would not be able to do that, so they would stay on the same bench between games. And then volleyball should be clean, just similar to footballs and football. And then soccer, so that's our next slide. Some of the same expectations or considerations with face coverings. It's going to be very difficult for soccer players during practice or during competitions to maintain 6 feet, so face coverings would be recommended. Do not share equipment again. Soccer balls would be sanitized, and similar to football, if locker rooms that use social distancing would have to be maintained. There were no recommendations, the next slide, there were no recommendations for cheer from the WIA, so we got this information from USA Cheer. These were their recommendations. So they're a little bit different. Mats should be cleaned at least if they're using mats each day of activity. Athletes should maintain their equipment themselves, and there should be no other shared equipment. Use proper physical distancing, similar to the other sports. Limited contact between groups. And again, there's a lot of common themes here from one sport to the next. Cheer would be considered a high-risk sport. Avoid congregating before, during, and after practice. Stunting should only occur with local directives that allow contact in sports. And then keep stunt groups together in their cohorts. Cheering can happen. I've seen our cheerleaders outside practicing, and they've been working with some of the younger girls. And they are able to social distance at least 6 feet. And I've noticed that our younger kids that have been practicing with our older kids have been wearing masks. So keep stunt groups, and then the last thing is keep stunt group distance from other stunt groups when possible. So those are some of the considerations for both our low-risk sports, our medium-risk sports, and our high-risk sports from the WIA. And the next slide, which is 16, I think Jason's going to take over from there. Are there any questions about any of those recommendations? Or considerations, I guess you could say.
I do have a question for Sue. So, with the Capital Conference going to the spring, if we were to allow fall sports, could we also then compete in the spring or not? Like if they decided to do tournaments?
So I can try to answer that, Sue. So you have by September 1st, we have to declare to the WIA if we're going to play the fall or the spring. What we're trying to get some more clarification on is if we start a fall season and for some reason can't finish, what the guidance is right now is you get less than 50% of a season in, you can then compete again in the spring. If you get more than 50% of a season in, your season's finished.
Okay.
The other thing that comes with that is students can now, if you have a fall season, so for example, if you allow your some of the sports to go in the fall and move some to the spring, athletes could compete in 4 different seasons if a local school district would allow it. And I think we would probably allow that. If athlete, like for example, if somebody wanted to go for cross country, if we allowed that to play in the fall, and then wanted to play soccer, boys soccer in that other fall season, that's a local decision that people can make.
I see. So then when you answer this elective, it's by sport?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
When you have to tell the WIAA it's an elective by sport, if you're having fall or switching to spring.
We have to declare by September 1st what we're going to do by sport.
Okay.
Well, you
So
said-
it's not an all or none type of thing?
No. You
Okay.
said you were waiting for clarification on that. What? 'Cause
On the
that's a
50%
very
piece.
important point, right?
So we did get that clarification, and I'll go over that when we get to the scheduling
Okay.
part.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Because that just came in this afternoon.
Yay, all right, just in time.
So one of the considerations that we will need to discuss if we move forward with fall athletics is what to do with spectators. So the WIAA did publish some considerations for spectators. First and foremost, we as a school district will need to establish a procedure for all of our venues to ensure that social distancing can be maintained. We also need to provide written notice to any attendee outlining what our mitigation strategies are and what our procedures are for the event. When those attendees arrive, all participants, spectators, event personnel, officials, media, etc., do need to go through a screening process that would likely look similar to what we're doing with our athletes now, where it's a couple of questions to see if they've been exposed to somebody who is symptomatic, if they have any symptoms themselves, to determine if they would be allowed onto onto our site or not. We also would need to create a communication plan so that should we find out that there was a COVID positive test that affected that event either before, during, or after, we need to be able to notify any attendee that was there that they may have been exposed. So one of the considerations that the WIAA put together is to consider grouping people into different tiers. So obviously our most essential people at those events would be our athletes and our coaches and our officials. Media would be tier 2, and then spectators, vendors, parents would be tier 3. Obviously, the larger those, the number of spectators that you're looking at, the more problematic it becomes in providing written guidance to everyone, screening all of those people effectively, and being able to communicate with them on the back end. The WIAA also put together quite a bit of medical guidance. So first I wanted to highlight a study by Dr. McGuine. So Dr. McGuine works at UW Health and is on the WIAA Sports Medicine Advisory Council. So this spring they looked at the effects that school closures had and sports cancellations on student mental health. So obviously for these student athletes who were surveyed as part of this, there are a lot of circumstances that may have contributed to their declining mental health. School shutdown, sports cancellation, the stresses at home that we've all sort of felt during this time. So they surveyed over 3,000 participants. 65% reported anxiety symptoms, and 25% reported suffering moderate or severe anxiety. Moderate to severe depression was 3.5 times higher during the spring shutdown than it was versus their control group, which they measure yearly. Amongst those student athletes, they found that physical activity was down 50% during the spring shutdown versus a normal school year. They have some quality of life indicators, physical health, psychological health, and overall health. And they saw a significant decrease in all 3 of those indicators of quality of life. It's estimated that 66,000 Wisconsin adolescent athletes are currently at risk for depression. And lastly, the quality of life for student athletes during the spring shutdown actually measured below a non-shutdown athlete or an athlete with concussions. So both of those control groups are measured yearly. What we don't have on this data is how the general school population is affected and how that correlates. But this at least gives you some data on Wisconsin athletes and the effect this past spring. Almost every single county had at least one athlete that participated in that study.
So, but to just clarify, only athletes were in this study.
Correct.
The general population was not in this study.
Yep.
Yeah, and Dr. McGuine would share that he, when he presented this earlier in the year at the WIA meeting, not this past one, but one previous, that he has given out surveys, and he has, these have been a piece of his survey, not a big piece of his survey. Well, obviously with the spring, it became a much bigger. He had a control group of athletes versus athletes. Sure. He can't compare it to, obviously there's stress and anxiety just based with the pandemic and school shutdown, how much more that impacted athletes versus non-athletes. But he was just comparing, that's the only information he had. He can't.
Right. I just think it's for my own edification, I think 65% of the people in here had severe anxiety over the past several months.
Yeah, it's been very difficult, obviously, for everybody.
And I think, although I feel this is very important, I sometimes feel that we pull out athletes and make them a special part of our population, and they are a part of our population.
Definitely. So additional guidance that the WIAA gave revolved around what happens if we have a COVID positive athlete or a presumed COVID positive athlete. So much of what they have released is really similar to what we have as local Lodi School District guidance and what came out through the Department of Health today. But there are a couple of differences that I'll highlight. So the return to play process for student athletes with a positive COVID test or a presumed positive COVID test, which means that they have at least 2 symptoms, means that they need to sit out at least 10 days since their positive test or the onset of those symptoms. They also cannot have a fever within the past 48 hours and cannot use any medication to reduce that fever. And they can show no COVID symptoms. One of the pieces that is above and beyond the state or our local guidance is that they need to have written medical clearance from a healthcare provider, which allows them to return. So I spoke today with our school nurse, and that is one of two pieces of this guidance that is going to be really challenging for us as a school district to follow. Just based on their backlog of work that they're doing. One of the reasons why that's in there is there is some data out there about myocarditis, which is a heart defect that results from viral infections. That's not COVID specific, that's any virus that a student athlete could catch, but there's not a whole lot of data out there. So that, she shared with me this afternoon, there is a flow chart which breaks down really the need for that medical guidance as it relates to a student's symptoms. So if they're asymptomatic or if they're really experiencing mild symptoms, that flow chart may indicate that they don't need a physician to sign off. But if they've had, some of the larger side effects of COVID-19, if they've been hospitalized, if they've really experienced long-term effects, that healthcare sign-off would be necessary per that flow chart. The other thing is athletes may not return earlier if a negative follow-up test occurs. So regardless of if they get a negative test in there, they still need to wait that 10-day window. That process is really similar for those athletes with close contact. So that is generally defined as within 6 feet for over 15 minutes over a 24-hour time period. Their waiting period that they would need to sit out is actually 14 days. It's just a little bit longer than a COVID case, and that's to see if those symptoms develop. They again can have no fever and no fever-reducing medications, no COVID symptoms, and they again cannot return earlier with a negative follow-up test.
So something you mentioned there, I think is another common misconception is the 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. I hear a lot of people talking about, well, I wasn't within 6 feet of that person for 15 minutes. But if you were for 5 minutes, and then an hour later 5 minutes, and then an hour later 5 minutes, now you have been. And I think that's a common misconception. It happens in the workplace and everywhere else.
Well, also, and I think that that doesn't necessarily take into account coughing, sneezing, singing, breathing hard, those kinds of things. I think that 15 minutes, 6 feet is
A general guideline.
right. Like it doesn't involve. It doesn't take into account some of the highest risk activities that would potentially expel more virus.
So, go ahead. So the two things that our nurse identified as being sort of difficult within this WIA guidance that we do not have is that a student needs to have a negative test before they come back. That is part of the WIA guidance. And that, right now we have tests available. If that were to change, that becomes an equity piece for some of our students who maybe aren't able to get in to get a free test. So she identified that as being problematic, and again, that physician sign off.
That's one of the things I wanted to address. We don't want to deal with having to have a negative test because depending upon your personal system and your antibodies, you could be 30 to 60 days after having COVID and still be testing positive for it. And so I wouldn't want them to have a negative test. I would be really interested in having them, at their expense, having a doctor say you're free to participate.
Yeah, and again, in our local guidance that we put together for students or staff to come back to work, we are not requiring a negative COVID test or any type of test like that. It's days. It's how many days you are out and when the first symptom come, and those types of things. And if you've had a close contact, as I said, you can't test out. When you can test out is when you've had some symptoms. If you have some symptoms and they test and you don't have COVID and you haven't had close contact with anybody who's had COVID, then when your symptoms get better, you can come back earlier. But if you've had close contact with somebody, you're out 14 days. It's just the way, that's the guidance from the state and from all the county health departments.
So these are WIAA guidance, but we would likely follow this, right? It's not.
We would follow probably every piece but the testing piece. I mean, I just don't see it as being equitable for our student body. First of all, how would we make sure that all of our students would have access to that test? What about families who don't have access to that test? And when I hear from our local health department and from our school nurses, we don't need kids to take that, to have that.
So just to clarify, if we eliminated that testing to come back, we would be following local, state health guidance.
Yes.
We would just not be following WIAs, but we would be following other local guidance.
Right. And again, it's all guidance. I'm really
Right.
tired of that term, but that's what
Well,
it is, it's guidance.
Right.
So I wanted to give you all an overview of the alternative season schedule as well. So what this season schedule does is it allows for us to either do a traditional fall season or to move to that alternative spring option. So both are fitted within that school year calendar by the WIAA. Again, like Vince pointed out, we do need to let the WIAA know what our intention is for each of our sports by September 1st. This is more for scheduling purposes. They know that there will probably be schools that start this fall and at some point need to suspend a season and will pick up in the fall, or excuse me, in the spring. But at least that gives the WIA some indication of what scheduling the spring is going to look like, what scheduling this fall is going to look like, and some of the numbers of schools associated with that. So again, a season constitutes at least 50% of the season completed, and that's prorated for football. So, and Sue, feel free to jump in if I miss something here. But there are 3 different ways that they measure that, and if you meet any of those 3. So one way that that's measured is to complete at least half of the number of competitions scheduled in the delayed calendar for the fall, to complete half of the total number of weeks that are assigned to each sport, or if you participate in a tournament series or culminating event. So any of those 3 ways, if you reach one of those, that is considered 50% of the season. They are going to prorate that for football. So for most sports, if you get 25% of the way into the season, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, is that then you would just start like everybody else in the spring. Football, you would have a prorated number of games. So if I had 2 games in the fall, I would have 2 less games in the spring. Sue, is there anything that I missed in that 50%?
No, it's just, if you get that much done, you're not eligible to compete in the spring. So it's really the start date or the number of competitions, however many weeks you get in, shows us where you're at. So they gave us a chart today that it's literally lays it all out for us, so it'll be easy to judge that. If we make 50%, if we try to compete, we'll know right away where we're at.
So the WIA also made some changes to their rules and policies. They eliminated the minimum number of competitions that you need to play to qualify for the playoffs. They eliminated sanctions for leaving a conference event for the year. They are allowing additional innings or quarters to be played. So if we get together with another school and to minimize risk of competing with multiple schools, you can add a 5th quarter on, and so that we can increase playing time for student athletes. The postseason structure for each season will be determined 30 days prior to the end of the season. So they're going to sort of determine what those will look like. Will they be regional competitions? Will they look to do a state level competition within 30 days of the end of the season? One of the challenges in the schedule, and as soon as I'm done with this slide, I'm going to have Tyler click into the sports season calendar so that you can see that, but it was also in your board docs, is there is some overlap between the fall to spring season and our traditional spring season. So for some of those athletes that are fall and spring athletes, there is some overlap. One of the concerns that has come out of our coaching staff is we have quite a few coaches who are fall and spring coaches. So, and many of those are not school district of Lodi employees. So there's some concern that asking for 3 months of flexibility in your job is one thing, asking for 6 months as you put those 2 seasons together becomes just a little bit more challenging. But Tyler, if you can click into that schedule, it really lays it out. So going from our traditional fall to our winter season, there's minimal overlap. As we get down into winter to spring, there's just a little bit of overlap between some sports, but it didn't look like it would be something that was unmanageable. But again, as you get down towards the bottom right-hand corner of that document, there is quite a bit of overlap. Some sports are up to 3 weeks of overlap as you go between this fall to spring option and this sort of the traditional spring season. It also does push our spring season back a little bit, so they'll be completing spring seasons at the end of June. So that gets moved back just a little bit, but again, close to a normal start for those winter sports. So when we met as an administrative team, we looked through all this guidance and we sort of came up with 3 options that we saw for spring sports. So I've laid those out for you, for fall sports. Option number 1 is to move all of our fall sports to the spring. Option number 2 is to allow low-risk outdoor athletics, which would be tennis singles and cross-country, that they would be allowed to meet, practice, and compete for NFHS guidelines and WIA considerations, and that then we would take low-risk indoor, which is swimming, moderate-risk soccer and volleyball, and high-risk sports, football and cheer, and move those into the alternate spring season. And then the last option would be to have all fall athletics meet, practice, and compete following the NFHS guidelines and WIA considerations to the greatest extent possible. The one option that we removed since we last met 10 days ago was to outright cancel all fall sports. We just feel like with the WIA providing this level of flexibility that's a lose-lose for everybody involved. So that's the one option that was there 10 days ago that's not there today. Once a decision is made about fall athletics, there are some follow-up considerations that we will be looking for some guidance from the board on, especially as we look to schedule competitions. So are we allowing parents and or spectators at those events? Do we schedule multi-team events, or do we stick to single school competitions? Are there certain counties and schools that we would consider traveling to or hosting for competitions? And are there certain counties or schools that we would not entertain for events? Do we limit competition to schools that have our current instructional model? Or do we allow our student athletes to compete against those students who are currently going into the fall in a blended or a traditional educational model? What metrics would we define for postponing or terminating a fall sports competition and or a season? What safety precautions need to be in place at other schools for us to go and compete against them? And how many competitions per week will we allow each of our teams to compete? And I'm sure that is not an exhaustive list of considerations, but at least a sort of a starting point. If we choose to push all of our sports or some of our sports to the spring, we also have some considerations. Will those sports be allowed to open and run open gyms? How will those look? Will we be able to keep the weight room open? What is our expectation? I know you talked at your last board meeting a little bit about wanting that contact with between coaches and players. What does that look like? And do we ask those coaches that have had a season to move to the spring, do we ask them to do that now, knowing that they may still have a spring season, and what some of that may look like? So obviously there's a sort of a big overall decision, but then some smaller decisions that play into whatever large decision you all make.
Oh yeah, hundreds of them. But
Is that all?
That's it.
So let me clarify something, Jason. So That document is not in board docs, that presentation?
That presentation is not, but all of that information was pulled from the Lodi Fall Athletics document.
Right, can you put that presentation into board docs?
Certainly.
Not the second, but.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we were still working on it today, so that's one of the reasons it's not in board docs. So as the piece, for example, what does 50% of the season, I didn't know that they had gotten that guidance this afternoon. So, and they met with coaches. The high school administration also met with all the fall coaches yesterday in 2 separate meetings, one before school and one after school, to get input and feedback and some of that too, and that was incorporated in that presentation. But yes, I will upload that.
Thank you.
I just had a question. Oh, go. Go ahead, Adam, go ahead.
Go ahead, Adam.
You're the boss, go ahead.
No, I'm not speaking, Joe.
No, it's me.
Sorry.
Joe can't
Oh,
speak.
yeah.
Sorry.
Joe, go ahead.
One of the things that I think we need to point out is that when we went over the 3 options, you'll notice that there is another thing that is different, and that is, we had decided that swimming was gonna happen in the spring or in the fall. We were gonna start our practices and hopefully have competitions. And the second option now moves that to the spring. And one of the reasons we consider doing that is because of some safety concerns that we do have in an indoor space, but also the fact that, you heard from some of the coaches about possibly moving some of these low-risk sports to the spring and being really difficult to start in March. Swim, you could start in March because you're gonna be indoors. So we took that, plus we considered some of the safety concerns that we have with it, and we decided to put that as our new option 2, just so you know.
The one thing I wanted to clarify, so we've got the 1, 2, and 3. And under 3, the last item, saying even if we would allow all the fall athletics to continue, that we would not allow any competitions for the medium and high risk? Or is that just like, we would have to decide that? Because under 3, it's listed as practice and competitions for low risk only as determined by NFHS, and practice and intra-squad for medium-high risk as determined by NH and FHS. And in the opening thing, the color-coded chart, it basically is saying that in order to play games in these high and medium risk, we would have to be in phase 3, which we are not. So I guess what I'm just saying is that, like.
I think that option still exists to play any sports, right? All of this is guidance, and clearly the WIA went away from risk levels associated with sports for any number of reasons. But we felt like that was sort of our starting place last time, so to leave that out of the conversation, I think would have been difficult. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's guidance, so you can go in a lot of different directions off of that. But that is the NFHS recommendation that is not found in the WIA consideration.
Oh, sorry, were you done?
Well,
Go ahead.
I just had, just the question I had then was, if we allowed a fall sports season that was only practice and intra-squad for medium and high risk, would we then be eligible to also play a WIAA spring season?
I don't think we would be, based on the second piece of that, like, because as you looked at the 3 ways, you count 50%. One of them is start of the season till how many days you got in. So one of the things that WIA talked about was if we move to spring sports, can we have contact days? Like in the summer, you can have 5 contact days for football, basketball, other sports have unlimited contact. But once school starts, you don't have unlimited. And they were owing, as of last, I know they had a meeting yesterday, but they were saying that no, if you had your summer contact days in the summer, you can't have them anymore, they're done, to try not to give people an unfair advantage. So it depends on, again, I would argue that we're more concerned about connecting with kids and having those conversations and things like that. That's where the WIA was coming from, but I know they were getting pushback on that, obviously, from the athletic directors, and so I don't know if they've revisited that or are going to revisit that. But that's the part where we talked about open gyms and things of that nature, because you can't have drills and what's called a contact day. You can't have actual coaching going on in the fall with our athletes if there is not a fall season going on. You can have an open gym, you can have the weight room open, you could have what's called a captain's practice. Captains get together and do stuff, and a coach is there to supervise so nobody gets hurt, but they can't direct things.
Sue maybe could answer this question. On the football, the number of athletes, 78, but that's divided over all teams, JV, varsity, JV2.
Correct. Yep.
So they wouldn't all be on the field at the same time, correct? Or how would they practice? They could divide them up, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Traditionally, we have the freshmen practicing by themselves on a separate field, and then the JV and varsity are typically together doing most of their drills. Joe, correct? Anything else to add to that or not?
I would just add that this summer, they had contact days, and so they had to change that, right? So we gave them real specific guidance of, and then Coach Poles talked about, and all the coaches talked about that. We gave them real specific guidance that they had to wear masks, they had to be 6 feet apart. If you were gonna have groups, they had a cohort, smaller groups, and so they rearranged how they did their contact days this summer around that idea of cohorting groups. It'll be harder as you get to getting ready for a football game, right? When you're doing some drills, you can kind of cohort some groups, but now you gotta have the whole offensive team out there doing, practicing. That'll be more difficult. I know Coach Poles will do whatever he can to make that work, but at some point, you're gonna have people standing right next to each other playing a game in football. I mean, there's just no way. I mean, there's offenses you can run where they don't stand quite next to each other.
But not every play.
But there's gonna be somebody right across from you. So.
The other thing I had seen, because I follow Badger football, and they canceled. I'm just distraught over that there's no season for the Big Ten. But in that, they do have either one time or thin face shields they can put inside of football helmets instead of wearing masks.
Wasn't that,
and
so you would want to do both. You
Right.
can do face shields. Initially this summer when we had that conversation, I had that conversation with Coach Poles. Initially, the WIA was saying no to face shields. They have now come out with a couple face shields that they would allow.
A lot of college teams that are going to play, like Iowa State, a lot of them are going to use those
So
face
you
shields.
could purchase them. I know, again, the football team they'd be happy to purchase them
Right.
if they get to play.
Right.
They also don't want to purchase them if it's going to make a difference between them playing and not playing, they will purchase them and put them in a heartbeat. The other piece I would say, I know for our school nurses, a shield does, but again, is like when we talk about teachers, you have to have a mask, right? You can have a shield as another layer of protection for your eyes,
Right.
but the mask is what's the droplets and things like that. And if you have a shield that's just coming out and going everywhere, unless you wear, like for our teachers would be what's called a Badger shield, where they've created this now where it's sealed on top and it's kind of got a neck around it, so it's sealed on the bottom as well. It's kind of the mask is on the bottom, so it's not over your face. And we've looked at ordering some of those. That wouldn't work for football, but I would think you would have to have both. You would have to have a shield and a mask. And again, I think that would be a worthwhile purchase in our football program. And I want to speak for Coach Poles, but I probably hear him right now yelling, yes, we would. Because I know he and I've had that conversation, that if he feels if that's what it takes for them to play, he will do whatever it takes for his kids to be safe and to allow them to participate.
And then the other question I had is, are we going to have any issues with having officials, referees?
That's a good question, yes.
Because a lot of referees are retired folks that might, I don't know.
We always have trouble with officials. I mean, again, the numbers of officials go down, so one of the things I would mentioned to people, is that's one of the reasons we really preach sportsmanship, and because we have a lot of people, like, not just Lodi, other places, that yell at officials, right? And so we lose officials, and we have fewer and fewer people going into officialing, being a refereeing. So that's my public service announcements for officials. But I would say two things. Yes, we'd probably have more difficulty against some, but we also have teams that have canceled games, right? So,
Right, so there's gonna be a higher
teams,
availability.
yeah, so there's
Yeah.
teams that have canceled games, so there's also officials that may be available. So I think that kind of balances out.
I have a weird, arbitrary maybe question, but, so looking at some of these teams that are like at 30 would need to take 2 buses where typically they would
Absolutely.
take 1. Would we have bus issues if there are multiple competitions on one night?
Well, again, being online, we have more available buses right now to do things like that. So like one of the conversations we had with the cross-country coaches yesterday is like, for example, if we would run cross-country against Poynette, like maybe if we're going to Poynette, we send the boys team on one bus, they go compete. When they get on the bus to come back, that's when the girls go. But yes, you're gonna increase your bus cost and things like that. There's no question about it, no matter how you do this. But I don't think cost should be the driving factor of
I wasn't
for busing.
thinking cost,
But you're
I
right.
was thinking like
Have a number
actual
of
buses and drivers.
Yeah, drivers would be, but again, if we, with us and Sun Prairie, who uses Cobusin as well, all going to, we're all online. Again, we would have to work with our bus company to see, and we would try to stagger schedule. That's what we do in the spring.
Right,
Spring is really when we
right.
struggle with that. And to be honest, we move our sports to spring, we'll struggle with that a little bit more, because you have, in the spring, you have multiple sports going on, and they're big sports, like track is huge, you know. And usually like football kind of matches that track number, well, it doesn't quite. But football's a pretty big number, but it's spread out. So the JV is going, or freshmen are going a different night, and usually your JV and varsity go together. You now have to at least double the amount of buses you have going. And the other possibility is looking at, allow parents to help transport kids. Not that you'd still have to provide busing, right, for an equity issue. And it's easier for, again, you think of a varsity football game, it's easier to get my son to a varsity football game than it would be to get my son to a freshman football game, right? Where he's got to be at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in wherever versus he's got to be there by 5:30 some night. We could look at those options as well.
And these numbers don't include like managers and stuff, I'm assuming would they still be team managers and equipment managers and things like that?
Right, so one of the things, if you look at the WIA guidance, is like managers not being on the field. Not that you couldn't have managers be a part of your cohorting and things in that nature, and we haven't had that discussion, but the WIA guidance, like for football, is that they're not even on the field or in the court, they're not on the volleyball court, or they're not. The more people we can pull off that, the better. So that would be their guidance, and I would think we would follow that guidance. Yes, sir.
According to the slide, if you have questions, someone has the answers. So let's try that perception. How about the liability aspect? At some point in time, I heard that people that were going to do athletics needed to have their parents and athlete sign a waiver such that if they got COVID, that.
Well, we would work with our liability carrier to see if that's something, and our legal counsel to see if that's something we needed to do. It would be one of the things that's tough to do with something like COVID is to pin down exactly where you acquired COVID, right? Even if Mr. Richter had COVID, and comes down with COVID, and I come down with it a couple of days later, it's really hard to say that I got it here, that I didn't get it from somewhere else, that I stopped at Quick Trip and got my soda, or I stopped at, something else. So, but that would be something we would have to look in the liability piece, absolutely. Make sure we're protecting our student athletes and our district and our coaches.
I think it would help if, I know normally kids have to ride on the bus, I understand that. But maybe in this time, if the students rode with their parents, that would,
Yeah, again, we would allow that, we do now, we're more, we would kind of treat it like, in your wheelhouse, solo ensemble, right? So solo ensemble, we treat it as, if parents want to take their kids, we allow that to happen, they have to be at a certain time, certain place at a certain time. So again, solo ensemble is a little different because you have different start times. But you still have to provide bus transportation, because there are certain kids who wouldn't have that opportunity to do that, right?
I understand that, but in the
yeah.
past, you could not, I mean, you had to ride the
There
bus.
had to
That's
be
what-
really, yeah, right, we want
That's
our
what I'm getting
athletes
at.
there, or everybody else transported by
Yeah.
our, as a team, it's part of the team experience, right? You go as a team, and you know everybody's gonna be there at that certain time, and they show up as a coach, and so that makes it much more difficult as a coach, because you're managing multiple pieces of that, and having to know that. It's something we could look at. The other piece is on a bus. When we talk about 24 kids on a bus, they are not social distance. I mean, that is a student in every seat. If you're gonna social distance appropriately, it should be a student every other seat, and you're talking 12 kids on a bus.
But we would not have to get a new policy if the kids wanted to ride with their parents, correct?
We would put together some sort of expectation
Okay.
on that, right? So we would have to make sure we laid out, like, what's the expectation for the parents for being there, and then we would have some sort of sign, like they're contacting the coach and people. So typically what happens, if we've had situations like that in the past, as a high school principal, I would get an email and asking if this was okay, because, we had a funeral in the morning and we're not gonna make it back to time to make the bus. Can we drive so-and-so to the game? Yes, and then I would copy in the coach, and we would make sure that kind of got, but we would have to make sure that communication was rock solid, so we knew, because right now, if everybody's riding the bus, you sit and you wait till, with cell phones, it's a little easier than it used to be, right? You're trying to contact that student, that we don't want to leave a student behind because they're a couple minutes late to the bus, thinking, well, they're riding with mom.
I just was thinking about policy committee.
Yeah, and the other
we don't
piece-
have to have a policy for that if you get the permission for them to ride with their parents.
Again, and I
and
want to
copy
bounce
on it.
that through our legal counsel, right, to make sure that we're protecting the district
Yeah.
on that. Those are all,
Well, that would help with a lot of different areas
that have
as
come
well.
up, yep.
So,
I had a question about the football, the specific to football. If half of the conference teams have already decided to move to spring, would football players prefer to play against some of the conference teams and then other teams that they wouldn't normally play? Or is it important to play against conference teams and then move to spring so that?
I don't want to speak for the football players. I have one who lives in my house. I could call him, I'd really embarrass him. But I think they want to play. I think right now, they could care less who's on the other side. They just want to play. And the concern, if they have to move the spring, they will play in the spring. The concern, just as Mr. Collier brought up and a couple others, there's no guarantee if you move a season to the spring that it's going to be there, right? There's no guarantee this is going away or getting better. There's a hope for some more. There's some things that hopefully could get in place, like vaccine. But when you start talking vaccine, you got to talk about, is that going to be there by then? And how many families are going to take it, right? Or we're going to wait and see what happens. The piece that Coach Poles brought up, which is more, which would help, would be the rapid testing. Like, if there's a rapid testing way we could test kids on a consistent basis, or we get turnaround. The issue we have right now with testing is it depends on where you go. If you go down to the Allied Energy Center, the turnaround time is pretty quick.
That's if you can get through the line.
Well, but the lines are pretty good.
Lines aren't
Now it's
too
down
bad
to
at
about
all.
10 minutes. It was really long when they first started, but now once they started doing the online registration, it's been fairly quick, is my understanding. And but if you go like some of the local clinics and things like that, because they will only test if you have symptoms, it takes longer. Sometimes up to 5-6 days to get your results back. Well, that's not very helpful testing wise. It needs to be quicker.
Well, I think there is a definite possibility that rapid testing would be available by spring, and I think that's one of the rationales for moving to spring, is saying, there is definitely hope that it would be better by then. We obviously do not know.
Well, what we will know by spring is more.
Yeah.
Well,
And you can't take that lightly. I mean, we're sitting here right now without any schools opening up. We see universities opening up all around us that are closing down within weeks.
Right.
We don't know. We could go through and the opening could happen in the next couple of weeks and no schools get cases, no schools get shut down. We find out that it's not that bad. And okay, then great. In spring, we have sports, regardless. Or we could find out that no, you just can't keep kids away from each other and they spread it like wildfire, like they do the flu and the cold and everything else that happens. So we will know more. Even if we didn't have to make this decision tonight, if we could make it in 6 weeks, it would be better. But we can't. We have, because September 1st is the date that we have to tell people, so.
And what do we have for COVID cases in our area, do we know?
I can only speak to the county level. It's hard, they will not break it down to the school district level. So.
I got it right here.
Oh, look at
Columbia-
you, right online. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Columbia County has 297 cases as of today.
Yep.
When the board made the decision to go online, which was 23 days ago, they had 198. So they've had 33% of the cases that they've had since this has started have happened in the last 23 days. Dane County has 1,020 more cases in the last 23 days. So they've gone from 3,904 to 4,924, so it's 20% of their cases have happened in the last 23 days. I can't speak locally. As I said, and I know I sent an email to the board today about, we've been talking about getting guidance from the Department of Health and Human Services about metrics on opening schools.
Yeah, they don't want.
And I apologize, I should know better, but they yanked all that guidance out of the document that they finally put out today, and there is no, I have a Zoom meeting at 2 o'clock on Monday with the superintendent's group to have that conversation with Department of Health and Human Services. There is no thought that they are going to move forward with that. So counties have come out, Sauk County has some, I shared, I think with the board, the Jefferson County one, which was interesting because Jefferson County then had, as I mentioned earlier, they went over their level, so they were having an emergency meeting with all the superintendents, and one of the reasons one of the conference schools that we were talking about is possibly not playing football and moving to online school, and even the last 2 weeks, the Capitol Conference has shifted significantly in their conversation about schools having sports in the fall compared to the spring. But I can't speak to, like, again, you're still, the other piece of that if some of our speakers were here today, it would still say, this is a county that has 55,000 people, and we have less than 300 cases. And Dane County has a lot more, but we have 500,000 more people. But we have a lot of people go back and forth between Dane County. So all those factors. The issue we run into, and I've shared before, is we don't have a whole lot of local guidance. Columbia County will share that we need to follow state guidance. Dane County will be coming out with school metrics, I'll guarantee. They've been holding them, waiting until they match the DHS, and I don't think they're going to hold back. So my guess is they will come out tomorrow or the day after. But I don't see Columbia County coming out with health guidelines, which would help us make this
I have a
decision.
question. I have a question about volleyball.
Yeah.
So if you have 10 people, limited 10 people indoors, that's one match. So that's no coaches, no timers, no anything.
So we would have to look at that number, you're right. Usually when we look at limiting events indoors, it does not include employees. So it doesn't include the coach, it doesn't include the official, it doesn't include the timer, it includes spectators and others. So we would have to look at how, again, even having a volleyball team in there is usually 15 girls, right, on each team.
Right.
So we would have to absolutely look at that and whether we would follow that guidance. And again, that's what it is guidance to limit. So when we've had open gyms for volleyball, we will have more than 10 girls in the gym, but they're separated by the size of the gym. You cohort them, and these are the groups of kids that can hang out, do, kind of like we did with football and other contact days where You could have more than 25, but they had to be separated, can never intermingle, and had to be out there.
Right, but it volleyball's inside and
It is.
football's outside.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shelley, can I just add to what you were talking about before with parents driving student athletes? So if parents drive student athletes, then they're gonna be there, so they're more than likely gonna want to attend. So that, right now we're talking about keeping spectators at a low number or 0. So
I think I think you'd have a hard, I shouldn't say hard, I think if you're gonna have events, you probably need to look at having parents,
Yep.
right? That every child gets to bring
Parent.
2 tickets or 2 parents or 4 or whatever that number is. You know, I can speak to, you know, my son's playing football. I mean, even though if we try to live stream it, I'm gonna wanna, especially if you don't know, this could be the last game he gets to play, or the next to last game. So in a football, and again, to speak to your point, in a football stadium, we can spread people out quite a bit, right? And we can put tape on bleachers and have groups sit together and spread them out. And if you only allow parents in there, there's room. Cross-country courses, it's long enough. We can, mark it off and assign people or have them sign up to where they can stand and mark those things out. Volleyball, again, you'd have to really work on where people entered and exited, but you have 2 sides of bleachers that you could really spread people out in. To spread them out, but you still have kids who are within 6 feet of each other and touching the same ball and that kind of stuff, so.
Well, another point on that was if parents bring their children there, we would have a better deal with busing. If a lot of parents brought their children there, and that was where I was going, and then something happened and I let it go. So that was another point that I wanted to make was.
Yeah, that was the point you made before, Ms. Bear.
I did make it,
I
okay.
totally,
Yep.
Totally understood. That's what you were thinking, is that we could cut down a little bit on busing, or it would help with that.
It's on the teleprompter.
Yeah,
Yep,
somewhere up there.
absolutely.
I have another question. If the expectations, if we do a sport and we write out the expectations of like what it's gonna look like for them here at practice and competitions, do those expectations travel with them to other?
So that was, I think, one of the questions, and I'm kind of dominating the conversation, I should let Jason and those guys jump in, but that was one of the questions that they had in the last slide. Like, if we're gonna let kids travel, where are you gonna let them travel to? And are there limitations to like what counties you allow them to go to? Or, Mr. Wilson talked about, well, if we show up at a cross-country meet and it's not set up the way we do, I think he used the word, well, we will make a suggestion on how to fix it. I would say that needs to be stronger. Either it's fixed or we're not staying. So I think that we would have, again, if you go down that road, we would have to put some real expectations in place. Ms. Meffert would have to share them with other athletic directors, and if we're gonna play, this is what's gonna have to happen. If it's not, then we're not playing. It's a hard, I mean, I'm just trying to think of how, if you did play, how you would make that work.
Would it make sense for the athletic directors to work together to create guidelines amongst themselves that they bring to us then to?
I think they would bring it
like-
probably to the superintendents.
Right,
I mean,
or
I don't think it
whoever.
needs to come back to this level. It would come back to as a group of superintendents. Like these, again, the difficult issue is all the local guidance, right? It's all different. So when I say this is what we're gonna do here in Lodi, doesn't mean if we're gonna go to Westfield that that's what they're feeling like, how it's have to be run in Westfield. Or, and I know that's a cross-country meet, that was one of our first ones on the calendar. Or, if we're gonna go to Dane County or different things like that. And that's one of the issues with Dane County, is Dane County is just trying to figure out, kind of Adam's point, we can't even run events, indoors. Like, so that's why a lot of their canceling, like they talked about, their football was kind of enforced, like some of the teams were talking about like trying to have football but have it outside the county, which doesn't, I mean, it's just that, so avoiding the rules isn't helping this situation, right? If those things are in there for a reason. And
And I assume that works both ways, so teams coming here would also be expected to follow all of our.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That would be, I think, again, if you did that, you would have to, these are the expectations we have. And if you're not willing to abide by these expectations, then we'll find somebody else to try to play. Again, it's gonna be a question of, who's available, right? I know the two private schools in Lakeside Lutheran and Watertown Lutheran Prep wanna play. They also have issues with, and one of their issues they have is they've started school. Lakeside Lutheran started this week, Watertown starts next week. They're done before Memorial Day. For them to push a season into June doesn't work for them. They can't push their athletes, especially Watertown Lutheran Prep, who has kids who come and stay from all over the country, mainly around the state, but some from all over the country. They can't have kids stay there, so it just doesn't work. So they want to play as much as they can now. Lakeside wants to play as much as they can now. Hustisford wants to play now.
I'd like to talk a little bit about facilities in the spring, if we don't allow some of the fall sports to take place, because we've got, and here's the thing, so generally in the spring, I believe, and you can correct me, anybody can correct me, but, we have baseball, we have a lot of these, I know softball for sure, but softball, baseball, they start their season in mid-March normally, and because of the weather situation, are utilizing gymnasiums, so they would be indoors. So there would be an overlap if we push these, like a volleyball or whatever, if we start pushing everything, we're really screwing up those spring events. Those kids have already lost out on the 2020 season. They didn't get to play this last spring. And now you're gonna push this on them and maybe not allow them to play. So I just wanted to bring that up, and the season's getting so extended. If we allowed for more of the fall athletics, well then, some of these, it would free up our new turf field, and possibly baseball and softball could practice outside on the turf field. Maybe that could be worked in. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Doesn't everything get pushed? If we go to the spring, doesn't everything get?
The spring season
Yeah.
has been moved.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens, the spring season for the WIA has been pushed back.
Right.
And
the earliest, if I can interject, the earliest the spring season starts is April 19th this year.
Okay.
a month later.
So then that helps with being able to, anyhow, helps with being able to practice outside,
Well,
period.
and again, the other issue for spring that is beneficial from what this board has done in the past is there will be a turf field.
Right.
Right, so soccer can practice on a turf field,
Yep.
football can practice on a turf field. If our fields are not ready in early March or mid-March for them to play on, you could schedule practices under the lights. You could, you have a space now where a year ago, we would really have struggled to find some space for those kids to play on if we made this move. So with the turf field, you're gonna have more opportunities, because you're gonna practice on it, and it's not gonna damage that turf field.
Right.
Where it's gonna damage our other green spaces if we're having football practice on them in early March.
And then this delaying WIAA into the, with softball particularly. I know baseball, I guess, has their own, their own field and name, but the Optimists utilize the girls softball field too. So then you start getting into our Optimist League if they can play this year. And so.
But those dates are set in stone for spring.
That's already a done deal.
So
they're gonna have to work around it, but yeah, by the second week of June or something, we've got Optimus youth programs, softball, t-ball.
A lot of them are on our fields and
Yeah, well, a lot of them, crossed here, they use the 2 diamonds here, and then they use the.
And high school sports would take
softball
precedence
diamond.
over all of those
Right.
events. We want our community to use our green
Right.
space and things, but our high school seasons always take precedence over any of those events.
We are only looking at half the story here, though. And what I mean by that is everything here says athletics. But we have a fall musical.
Yep.
That I guess we're just assuming is canceled at this point.
So we have talked.
You don't have to, I want to finish my point.
I'll let you finish, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can correct me later on, but I mean,
I'm not planning.
we've got musical, we've got music students who are not going to get to participate in band. We have choir students who are not going to get to participate in choir. We have shop students or technology students that aren't going to be able to get. We have a lot. I mean, yes, we want to do something great for all of our kids, but we're in an unfortunate position that I don't think we're going to be able to. So I think we're just going to have to fess up to the fact that we're all going to have to do the best we can this year with whatever we can do and get as much.
And that point is good, like, some stuff that has to be indoors, and indoors is really risky.
Yep.
Some stuff is innately outdoors. So when we're talking about, well, how could we allow children to play sports when we can't allow them in the building?
There's a difference.
Yeah, yeah.
There is I struggle with this a lot, but outside is different than inside.
Yep.
As far as risk goes. And I think we should take a moment, we all acknowledge this. If we could get any of these activities to the kids safely, we would. They
need these activities.
They do, and they need them just as much as they need academics.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not about saying sports and co-curriculars are not important. It is, but the situation we're in right now is what can we allow? And sometimes it's like, if we say we can allow outdoor sports, and then the musical students, they don't get that, well.
Yeah, that was my point.
We're doing the best.
It's going to be heartbreaking, and we're going to doing the best we can for who we can, and we're not trying to pick and choose other people. And there are ways, as you were about to mention, and I cut you off, that to do alternative things for some of those things. So, and I think, but I guess that's my point in general, is that there's going to be no decision here that's going to make everybody happy. We all know that. We've lived through it already, but our goal is to do what we can do in a safe way. But I will stick to what I said earlier. The longer we can kick decisions down the road, Adam said this last time, that even just the fact that if you get COVID now, your chances of survival are much greater now because we know how to treat it better. That happened because of time. And there's going to be the same thing with this. Is trying to make these decisions today with the knowledge we have is very, very difficult. 6 weeks from now, it'll be a little easier. 2 months from now, it'll be a lot easier. At Christmas, it's going to be a whole lot easier. Because we're either going to just say this is the way the world is, or we're going to say it's gotten worse, or it's gotten better.
And that's the whole rationale between WIAA's movement, right? That there is the thought that we will have better tools to deal with this in the spring.
Yep.
Bottom line.
Jason, were you going to say something earlier?
I was just going to speak to the musical. So that, Erica Bardwell, our musical director, has made the decision to push to the spring. So that is in Joe's principal update to the board from the last board meeting. But they've worked out, they're looking at hopefully being able to do a musical in May. It just, with the data of indoor and the data of singing being uncertain at this time, they felt that was the best decision for them. But right, it's there are other co-curriculars coming down the line too. Mock trial will start up at some point. Forensics will start up at some point. I think the WIA is pressing in that things are starting now, and that we have a September 1st date that is pretty firm. But certainly, right, this is, to speak to Stephen's point, this is part of a larger conversation of how do we get kids back involved with adults and with each other and with the school and some of the activities that they are used to.
And there's also a consideration, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna talk to Jason's point, if that's okay. There's also a consideration of moving the spring play into the fall and potentially doing something like a radio play, which is gonna be really safe. So that was also in my admin report that the board could read. So we're considering that as well. So moving the spring play to the fall and moving the musical to the spring.
Well, and I think that's a really great idea, and perhaps there are more ideas that could get more kids involved because some of the kids won't be involved in their typical co-curriculars. Perhaps there are other alternatives that could be offered, thinking creatively. I mean, right now we're really talking about sports, but all these other things would be awesome to think creatively like that.
Yeah, and that's why musical wasn't involved in this, just because we've kind of made that decision and looking at, so what it was, initially when we first put this together, the first time it came to the board 2 weeks ago, musical was a part of this, but then we had been working through it. But we're also not dealing with other schools, officials.
Yeah, we don't compete with them on that level anymore.
Right, so
Not
I gotta,
face to face.
we gotta compete with space.
I know Jason
We own
feels a
that
little
sector.
tainted by not winning some awards over the years.
Yes, but it's, you know, working with other schools and things like that, so you have to have, so that becomes, that's why this becomes, and again, it's now, right, it's the first one. You know, the WIA pushed football back, and the WIA has not given, again, they've given some guidance. Their really mantra is, if you want to play, we will help you do that. If you don't want to play, they gave us that support, but they haven't given a significant amount of guidance, and again.
Yeah, we're not getting guidance from anywhere.
Well, and again, as I said,
Just in
I
general,
apologize, I
humans.
should have thought of that with the Department of Human Services, because that.
We all held out
We
hope for
haven't.
that.
It's talking about, one of the former other superintendents in the area said he's gonna write a book called Kicking the Can, because that is sick.
So I have a question. If there are not certain sports this fall, or any sports this fall, can we extend like the BFS program into more of an evening program? with
So
more
great
set
question,
hours?
great question. The issue with extending BFS, like we can open the weight room. The people who run the weight room, right now we run it from 5:30 in the morning till about noon. And then again at 3:30, you know, Brent's better than I do, 3:30 till
3:30 to
later, 6 or something like that. Well, the people who run the weight room are gonna be teaching now between 7:30 and 3, right?
Right, I wasn't thinking during the school day. I was
Yeah, but
thinking
if
more-
we only have 10 kids in there, right? Right now, that's why we have so much time right now, is we're only allowing groups of 10, and we can still do that, right? Or we could do something maybe differently where you run a BFS where you have one group out in the gym doing something one morning and the other group in the weight room, and then they flip the next following day. Because we cohort the kids in the weight room, which has
Right.
been very beneficial. So if somebody gets sick, I can just cohort that certain group of kids, and there's sanitation in between when those are involved. And that was, I think, one of the other questions that the high school administration put together was like, do we allow open gyms? I think if we don't have sports, we continue to try to allow those open gyms to happen under the rules that we have put together for this summer contact, that kids can still come in. Just like we're trying to allow kids to come in, we're working on allowing some of our students with IEPs
Right.
and into our buildings slowly and surely and working through that. We do want to continue to allow so kids have some opportunities to be active, especially as it gets darker earlier and colder.
Or
Or is
opportunities
there,
for
oh,
crew
sorry, I was
that-
gonna say, or is there even a possibility of some PE classes being very small cohorts outside during the day? I don't know. I mean, yes, just something that we can still provide some kind of outlet and activity. And at least, you know,
Things
offer
that
them
can
the
be
opportunity to
tightly
still.
cohorted
Right,
and
and the
outside.
opportunity to stay in shape and stay active. So like when sports do start, they're not coming off of a 6-month hiatus. I mean, that's the purpose of BFS in the summer, is to keep them in shape and so prevent injury and.
I also wrote down here on notes, Kurt was really adamant about having cross-country in the fall. Would there be any reason we can't do that if we feel that we can make it safe? Yeah, I mean, this is from that particular coach for that particular, for just, oh God.
And tennis.
Yes.
So that was one of the options that
Yeah.
we get, and again, you're the board, you can create an option. But that was one of the options that was presented to you, was that allowing tennis and cross-country to go, move everybody else to the spring. The other two options were move everything to the spring, or let all the sports play now. And I've also heard the conversation, like, do we let all the outdoor sports play now?
Yeah.
And not allow volleyball and swimming, and not push them to the spring. That wasn't a recommendation, but I've kind of heard the board kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I
a
think
little
there's a
bit.
fourth one.
There's plenty of, right, we could come all day with it, but we also try to limit, like,
I really think it pivots on the outdoor thing.
I do too.
It does, it does.
Oh, I think it's more
I
than
think
that.
it's more, I would,
Yeah.
It's more than that.
I mean,
I have
that's
a
one
hard time
dividing line.
envisioning
Yeah.
football, even outside, with the large amount of kids on the sideline and the interaction of that, making that extremely safe. I have a hard time with that.
So if we have a positive player on our team or a positive player on the other team,
We shut it down?
do we like, how many kids, let's just say a game situation.
so,
A player on the opposing team tests positive the day after the game.
so I have tried to get this information from Dane and Columbia counties. Because my understanding would be, for example, we play, I'll use Lake Mills. We play Lake Mills on a Friday night. Student gets sick Saturday, test positive for COVID over the weekend. My initial talk was like, that whole team they're all quarantined. Because on football, like, it would be very difficult to, like, how much had contact, who didn't. That Columbia County would say, no, we will try to contract trace and try to figure out who was 15 feet away. I would say the same thing in the classroom, right? So when I talk about, maybe it's easy, when I talk about a second grader in a classroom, I will share that with, like, a second grader comes in, we cohort them, they're in a room with 15 other kids, the only time they leave is go to the bathroom, and they go out the recess to one corner of the playground, so they don't have any interaction with any other kids. 2 teachers come in to, like, art comes in and music comes in, but that student doesn't leave. About 2 o'clock, the student feels sick. Next day, test positive for COVID. And if I talk to Dane County would say they're in a 900 square foot room for 5 hours in a day. They're second graders. There's no way that we're gonna be, unless you're absolutely sure that they didn't have contact with somebody, we're gonna quarantine the whole class and those all 3 of those teachers. Columbia County would say, no, we're gonna try to contract trace and figure out who's on 15 feet, and that's the only people who are going.
Well, no, Columbia County's gonna tell you to do that from what I read today.
Well,
because they don't have the staff or the ability to
So,
do that.
well, they have to do some of the contact tracing, but yes, we will have to play a role in that, like who is in contact, and then they will tell you who. So that's the hard part with all of this, like, so it comes down to, and it changes, right? It could change. So the first game that happens, only a couple kids. Next game it happens, everybody goes. I know, like, and that's one of the things you could set too, is like, if we have this many positive cases, we're shut down for 2 weeks, right? Even if we practice, even if you're cohorting or something of that nature. The issue that's a concern right now in Columbia County, which came up in the Columbia County call today, is some of our teenagers are starting to refuse to tell people who they've been in contact with, because they don't want to be the one who is getting other kids quarantined, or the one who shut down their team, or things of that nature. I hadn't heard that before. Columbia County said that's been better for them than other counties, but that's starting to become an issue. They had an outbreak at the JAG a while ago, and that was a real issue for them. They were able to get around it by touching base with other people and be able to see who was in contact. But, and again, I like to take our kids' word for it, that they would follow up and do what they need to do. I haven't had any belief that our kids wouldn't do what they're supposed to do. But that was, in a Columbia County call today, was brought up explicitly, that this is starting to become an issue with some of our teenagers, that they are not being honest with who they're in contact with. And part of it is, so I'll use, again, my child as an example. If you call my son, who's 17 years old, and a contract tracer, he's a 17-year-old boy, you're gonna get about 4 words out of him. And he's a very articulate young man and knows, but, right? So if you're calling him on the phone. So my thing would be to Columbia County, well, you should call the parents. He's 17, he's 16, they can't, unless because the student's FERPA rights, the student has to give them permission to talk to their parent.
If it's through the school, if it's a
No.
County.
Yeah.
So,
It's just like.
The school, and the
healthcare.
school, we really don't have a whole lot of right of contract, like calling parents and trying to figure that out.
so if we have a student who tests positive, first of all, we would know because the contact, if the contact
They should
tracer got
the
the
county should let us
information.
know.
Right, but we can't find out anything other than what the contact tracing can tell us. Right,
Contact tracing should tell us who other kids they've been in contact with. And we will have to do some of that, right? So that's, I mean, again, they're gonna come and ask us if a kid's in a classroom, or if a kid's in BFS, we're gonna say, what other kids were in BFS at that time? What other kids were in this football pod with them? What other kids were in the volleyball pod with them? And we would share that information, and then they would do their contact tracing and talk to those parents and do that stuff. Because they're not, that would be our role, absolutely our role. That's why we pod kids in the first place. But that adds always a layer, right?
or it's the entire offensive line, or, I mean.
It is,
No,
but
I'm not
I
laughing at you, I
also.
was trying to picture
So-
playing
so
on
I'll-
an offensive line.
The two things I would say about that is, one, I am less and more concerned. I am less concerned with a football season getting interrupted than my third grade classes getting interrupted, right? That all of a sudden, we are in person, and now we all have to, boom, go online tomorrow, and people, so when we went to online education, I think that's the right move for that very reason, because tomorrow, you are online, and we're not, we can say we're trying to prepare for online and in person, but it's really difficult to do that. But the second part of it is, if our kids are getting sick, they're getting sick.
Yeah.
And they're getting other people sick. And a lot of our young people are asymptomatic, and we're not testing them. So they're passing it around, and they don't know. So you watch even young athletes playing professional, like a lot of those athletes who are testing positive aren't symptomatic, but they're being tested constantly, and who are they bringing it home to, right? They're bringing it home to parents who are more likely to be symptomatic, or touch and base with grandparents, or things of that nature. So that's the other, that's why I say it's both, right? That's why this issue is so difficult, right? You're looking at physical health, not only of your athletes, but of those around them in our community. But you're also worried about our mental health and our physical health of our athletes and our students, and and the connection, because it is really difficult, as the coaches talked about. If you lose a season, if you're losing that connection with, but it's also a global pandemic, and it sucks for all of us. It really does.
The one thing I will say about outdoor sports, or any sports, it's the parents' decision to let their kids play in those outdoor sports.
Yes, that's true, but it puts a lot of kids in a really difficult situation.
I understand
Right,
that.
so it's the same thing when we buy our banners at the high school, which I'm not a huge fan of, and my son just bought one for football. We put people in a really difficult situation when we say, you don't have to buy one. Okay, you're the only kid who doesn't have a banner up there. So parents figure out how to make that happen. It's gonna put a lot of families in a really difficult situation. I would agree with you, it's up to the parents, and it's up to those families, but that puts some families in some really difficult situations.
Sorry. So we're at a point where we just need to decide specifically football on its own, correct? And
Well, I
whether
think-
to continue to follow the WIA
You
or
could
take
do-
some of those out.
You can do any of them any way you want. You don't have to, football doesn't have to be any different than any of the rest of them. You can decide them sport by sport.
Yeah, we could
I
do
think
sport
it
by
is sport
sport.
by
I don't know, that's fine,
However
let's
you guys
just
wanna do it.
start doing something.
I think that's the only way we can do it. There's too many things.
All right, cross country.
I would, based on what Coach Wilson said, I would say if he feels that cross-country can play in the fall, with 50 people there at a thing, I would take him at his word.
So you want to make a motion? Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept having cross-country stay in fall.
I'll second.
Motion by Charlotte and a second by Julie. Cross country in the fall, further discussion?
Middle school and high school?
Agreed.
Good question.
I didn't put that in my notes.
I guess the comment I have is just in general, it's not specific towards cross-country though, is that I guess one of my fears of doing anything in the fall is the potential, and to me, it's like starting school and going backwards. This is the same thing. Starting a season, getting to the halfway point, and then having to pull the plug on that means they're done. And, you know, I'll admit that what I think I heard from the coach tonight was, we're willing to accept that, and so, okay, but that to me, if I was a student, and let's face it, they're smart kids and they know what they're talking about, but they're passionate and they want to play, and they want to play now. But there's a huge potential, and it wouldn't even have to happen in Lodi. It could just happen in enough other teams that the WIA steps in and then does say, we're done for the fall. So just put that on the table.
Well, somebody could, that could be the thing in a month from now.
Yep.
But I think it's better that with the way Coach Wilson presented it, I was very impressed, number one. And I think that there's I think this is one of the sports that we have a good shot at actually.
There goes the chickens.
You okay there, Adam?
There goes Adam.
And we've already allowed them to start practicing.
Yes, you don't want, otherwise, yeah.
I don't think we should take that away.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree that it would be devastating if the whole thing had to be shut down. But I think of the sports that could potentially be in the fall, that cross-country, and,
There's the potential for this to get shut down at any point.
At any
with
point
of these,
in life.
anything. At some
Yep.
point, we have to start taking some chances.
Yep.
Let's give it a shot for the ones that we feel we can give them the best shot. I don't know.
So it's not just a yes or no, though. It's also guidance. They're asking for guidance on a whole bunch of issues.
Correct.
But we
before
can't,
you vote yes or no,
we can't come up
that's
with
what
that
the
tonight.
guidance is looking for.
There's no way we can do that tonight.
We have to do that.
Yeah, we're going to have to get a recommendation from the administration, and they're going to have to just go with that.
Have to do it.
I guess what I would just like to interject, I guess what I see with any of these sports that we would approve tonight, that there are very limited spectators, if at all, parents, that's it.
Actually, that would be
There are no.
better parameters.
Yes, there's a very tight parameter,
Parents
on
and spectators?
who is allowed to be a spectator.
well, for all these things too, like we need to talk to Sue, or Sue would need to, give us some recommendations about all these additional board considerations, spectators, metrics for postponing, how do we limit, like I said, we can't decide all of these, but we are very concerned about keeping our athletes as safe as possible, and we're concerned about allowing the season to go on. So, we do need to be able to approve some ideas for that, but not tonight.
Well, I try not to give recommendations, I don't want to give recommendations, but my recommendation would be, if you're going to consider additional consideration, that you allow parents to start, that's all you're going to allow is parents to events.
Yep.
We do not allow multi-team events, that they are single-team events, and that is it. So for example, cross-country, we race Portage, we don't bring Portage and Westfield in, it's just one other team. We will have to look at travel, that part, I'd have to look at what's going on. I don't think we limit competition to schools that are in our instructional model. The metrics, we're gonna have to work out just like we do for school, because we were hoping for some guidance on that. And then we will have to put some safety precautions in place to make that work, and we will limit the amount of competitions that we have in a week.
So when we're saying parents, we just mean parents, no siblings?
Guardians.
So guardians, so we would probably look at each sport, like what we talked about for graduation was 4 people so I can't limit it about 4, so because then you have families who have, kids who have 2 sets of parents.
Yeah.
So usually you would look at like 4 adults or 4 people per athlete, right, if that makes sense.
And I think you're gonna.
So we'll have to look, right, so we'll have to look and see if that works. So if you, for example, approve swimming, That can't happen.
That's not gonna
Right?
work.
So if you do volleyball, we'd have to look and see what that would be like. So now you're talking 30 kids, so you're not talking, can we do that? So we'll have to, so it may be different between sports, so we'll have to look at space that we're gonna
And I
use. But I
think
think that's our guidance.
You'll have to be super specific, like for adults versus for family members or for people, and if it's including like siblings, like the rule, like they have to stay seated with those people, like you can't be moving
Yep,
around.
social,
and those
yep,
things.
I would agree with that too. That has to be, we'll have to put down some real specific guidance on spectators and what they can do and what they can't do. Because we have to know who's there, right? And we have to know who has contact with it. So that's the other part that's gonna be on the administration and
Will there be a sign-in?
crowd, we're gonna have to
Sign-in?
probably check
Do a
in and
sign-in.
have a symptom check in and do that kind of, all that kind of stuff we would have to do, yes.
Because we have to know, as it stated several times, who's at the practices, so we'd have to know who was there in the
We have
stands.
to know who's at games,
Who's at games.
right?
Would there be a
And
temperature
do an-
check?
I don't know, we probably wouldn't do temperature check, but we do a symptom check probably.
Okay.
So
Okay, so let's,
Go ahead, Stephen.
I can throw this in anytime, so we can go ahead and finish
Yeah,
that.
so I just think that we would, that, if that helps, that's, I think, the considerations we would look at.
I think that helps.
yes.
Adam,
Yeah.
we're ready to vote.
Yeah. So any further discussion? Okay, roll call. Bill,
Yes.
Stephen,
Come back to me.
Julie,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Adam says yes. Stephen,
Yes.
cross country, approved. Are we skipping cheer?
Can we do tennis?
Can we stay with the low ones first?
Yeah, let's stay with the little ones.
Because I think, are they
Let's get
outside?
some momentum here.
You got it.
Give me one heart attack at a time.
I'll make the motion that we approve tennis, both singles and doubles.
I'll second.
A motion by Ben, a second by Julie.
Yep.
Further discussion?
Did we not talk about just doing singles, not doubles?
I thought we did.
We
The
did
coach-
last time, but the
Wow.
coach did say they,
What did he say? He
he
said,
said that doubles was very feasible because you're not
Because
allowed
they're
to
6
have
feet,
six
because of the-
feet each
Yes.
other during competition.
And
this
they're
came
out,
from the coach.
yes.
Technique-wise, you shouldn't be.
I mean, let's face it, if you're within 6 feet, you have the risk of whacking your partner.
I can do that just walking.
Yes,
Okay. All right, I would, wait, where are we at? Yes?
We
Outside.
need to,
we got a motion and a second, and we're in the discussion.
We're in
phase.
discussion.
Okay, sorry.
And it is for both singles and doubles.
Yes,
Yes.
I was specific about that.
Yes.
So a vote?
And we're quiet, so we're ready to vote.
I get it.
So, I'll
Go ahead,
start.
Bill.
Yes,
I'll leave Stephen to the end because you have trouble before. Julie,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Barb,
yes.
Adam says yes. Stephen,
Can't go against everybody else, so yes.
We can.
You can.
It doesn't really make a difference if I do or not.
it's important to you, it's important to us that you vote,
Well, here, let me tell you what I'm thinking.
vote for yourself.
Right, so my gut tells me this is the wrong decision. But I trust you all, and if you all feel that it's safe, I'm gonna put my gut aside and say, we're gonna go with it.
We're feeling it's safe enough.
We're gonna get to a moment here shortly where the rest of our guts aren't right with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I trust you guys. I mean, this is saying a lot. I trust this group, and I trust,
What do they call that, intestinal upset?
Distress.
so my vote is yes.
okay, so that passes 7-0. Swimming. Any motion on swimming?
What were we
Or
talking
do we not
about?
want to make a motion on swimming?
Well, it could easily go to spring because it doesn't, it's inside.
Right.
You have to make a motion one way or the other.
I would like to make a motion that we move swimming to the WIAA spring season.
I will second that. This is Angie.
Motion by Julie and a second by Angie. Any further discussion on that?
Do we or do we not have boys swimming?
We do not.
We do not.
No more.
Okay.
And this is a co-op swim, so.
It is a co-op swimming.
Is the other school, they are,
We would have to talk to Wisconsin Heights.
but they're not practicing or anything?
Yeah, well, they were just gonna have an organizational meeting today, so.
So pending,
But Heights is also part of the Capital Conference, right? So Capital Conference has talked about moving.
Right.
Swimming's not part of that conference, but they've talked to, and they voted in
Oh, okay.
approval of moving all their sports to the spring, so.
okay.
Can you get back to us with what they,
Yeah, we'll follow up with Heights. Obviously, that's the first thing we'll do. And if we need to get back to you and have a conversation, we will.
because, I mean, heck, we just love coming here every week.
I think swimming, I really feel much better with swimming in the spring. I feel like.
Did anybody second this?
Yep.
Oh, I think I did.
Oh, Angie did? Okay, all right.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, Adam says yes. Barb?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Bill?
Yeah,
Okay, swimming is in the spring. I'm assuming that's all swimming, including relays and individuals.
Yes.
That's, I think, what we thought, yeah.
Okay, volleyball. We want to make a motion on volleyball?
sure, I'll make the motion that we have volleyball in the fall. Girls volleyball, no less. It's the only volleyball we have.
There's boys volleyball, we just don't offer it.
What now?
There is boys volleyball, we just don't offer it.
Yes, we just checking the scenery here to make sure everybody.
A motion by Bill. Does anybody want a second volleyball for the fall?
I'll second
We're gonna do
it.
a second,
I'll second it.
That's Julie, okay, so
Yeah.
Julie in a second. So is that further discussion on that?
I have a really hard time saying yes to any kind of indoor sport with that much close proximity.
Can volleyball be moved to the spring?
Yep.
They all can be moved to the spring.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm really interested in us making direction for each sport.
Yeah, so we could direct it to go to the fall, or to the spring.
Yeah. I also, I agree with Barb. I would feel very uncomfortable with volleyball being indoors in the fall. I think we would be much more successful spring.
Spring, I agree.
So somebody want to modify the motion?
No, let's just vote.
Okay, just vote.
We'll just vote on this one.
We'll just
Okay,
vote, and
just vote on
if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, we start over.
Okay.
That's fine. And anyways, the league I got taught in, you try to make positive motions.
Okay.
Any further discussion, or are we done? Okay, I'll vote first. Adam says no. Barb?
No.
Angie?
No.
Shelley?
No.
Julie?
Yes.
Do what you gotta do. No, it's okay.
No.
Bill?
I made a positive motion, I'm voting for it.
Okay, Julie?
I would vote yes also.
Okay, so 5-2, so that fails. Anyone make the motion to move volleyball to the spring?
I'll make the motion that we move volleyball to the spring.
I'll second, Pear.
Motion by Steven and a second by Shelley. Is there any further discussion on moving volleyball to the spring?
That was a positive motion, by the way.
That's all I ask. It's easy.
Yes, always risk is stressful, so sorry for the lack here today. Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote. Adam says yes. Barb?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
And Bill?
I'm gonna stick with it now.
Okay, so that passes 6-1. Volleyball will be in spring. Moving up the list is soccer.
I make a motion that soccer move to the spring.
I'll second. Go ahead, Barb.
I'll second.
Motion by Angie and a second by Barb to move soccer to the spring. Further discussion?
Well, we heard from the coach, and I feel that it is it's classified as a moderate risk. I think it's enough contact that it's higher risk.
It gives us more time, I think. Time is what we need.
Thankfully, we have the turf field.
Right.
Where there would be practice space.
I don't
competitions.
ever remember when they came and proposed approximately, I don't know, a year ago about putting in a turf field, anybody saying, well, you know, this thing COVID's gonna come and we're going to be able to start when it's muddy and snowing.
We did talk about the opportunity of baseball and softball being able to do some stuff on that because of muddy fields. We absolutely talked about that.
I was doing my best
I
to
know.
be,
A smart aleck?
yes.
Notice I didn't swear, Vince.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and you don't even have your sign in front of you telling you not to do it.
I know. Steven
I
doesn't love me
just-
anymore.
I guess.
All right.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
It's an outside thing.
Well, you can vote against it.
Yeah, I,
Move it to spring?
why? They're gonna be outside in the spring or they're gonna be outside in the fall? Right?
I just think
Soccer
giving us
doesn't
more
practice
time
inside.
gives us more time, gives us the opportunity for rapid testing to be developed, possible vaccines, to learn more about the virus.
And the entire Capital Conference they recommend that the schools move to the spring.
But I thought soccer wasn't in the Capital Conference. Soccer is.
Yes. Swimming's not. Swimming's in the Badger. Soccer, we are in the
So
capital.
soccer used to be in the Badger Conference when we started.
That, I wasn't here when you started soccer, so.
I
Yeah,
was.
because you were probably in the South Central at the time.
Yes, it is outside, but it's not like tennis or cross-country. I mean, it's more contact, there's more people, it's not like a single individual.
I've never played soccer, but I asked people who have played soccer, and they did not see that it would create a particular.
Well, my son played soccer, and
They're all over each other, right?
yeah, I mean, it's
Pretty
pretty,
much a contact sport.
it is, yeah, it is. There is, and I mean, yeah, I mean, it kills me to not have the kids play in the fall, but I really feel that the spring season be not only safer, but more likely to go through the season and actually not be shut down, so. But it is, the players are pretty close.
And-
They're
and
often running into each other.
One of the flip sides in my mind is that I would like to have them try to have a season in the fall. And if it fails, it fails. And Stephen, you made the point about, well, you never know if it could be shut down. Think about this. In athletics, there's actually 2 seasons. There's a season where you go in conference and you try to win a conference championship. And then there's a season where you go into the WIAAs, generally. And in the WIAAs, you either win or you go home. Well, situation being what it is, you play for today, you play for now.
If we
Great.
were
It's not
talking
your
about.
senior year. I'd rather play a full season my senior year. And if we get halfway through the season and there's an outbreak, then they're done. So I understand what you're saying, and you know, we're gonna vote the way we're gonna vote, so.
They're not only done, but a bunch of people are sick, is what would happen, and.
But didn't in the beginning, did we see that 8 and 3 vote for our conference? 8 out of 11
Yeah.
are already going in the spring.
Yeah.
They made a
So we would be joining them.
They made the
Right.
recommendation to do that. Obviously, each of those have to go back to their individual boards. Some have already made that decision, some hadn't, and we're going back to the boards. So that was the recommendation of the conference, though, as a whole, was to move soccer to the spring.
So with an
I think I can update that a little bit, because I've had an email tonight. Lake Mills is moving forward with their fall sports. So if I'm counting correctly, I believe that would be Lakeside Lutheran then would be going, with fall sports. Lake Mills, Watertown Lutheran Prep.
Cambridge.
I don't know about Portland. And Cambridge, yeah, I don't know about
Cambridge
them.
is the other.
That's the Capital Conference for soccer?
Soccer, yeah, they all play soccer. Cambridge, yeah, they're in soccer too. But I don't know what Deerfield's doing, so I don't know what they're doing with their soccer. I was just thinking of the Capital Conference vote. Watertown Lutheran Prep, Lakeside Lutheran want, and Cambridge voted to
Those are the ones
continue
who-
to have seasons.
And they're
They were the
planning on
three.
continuing to, well,
And again,
we
they-
don't
yeah.
know.
So, I'm sorry, say that again.
So those individual schools are not sure what they want to do, but they did vote.
Those three schools voted against that recommendation. They want to have sports this fall.
But as far as their decision, their ultimate decision to have them, that's.
It's all up to, again, most districts are doing kind of what we're doing, right? So they're having conversation at the board level, and some have already made that decision and have moved on. Some are in Dane County where that decision's kind of been made for them. And others are, I think, Lake Mills had their board meeting tonight, so that decision is what Sue just shared. So everybody's in a different place.
Okay, any further discussion? So this is a vote on moving soccer to the spring. I'll start with myself. Adam says yes. Barb?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Julie?
No.
Stephen?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
One passes 5-2. Chair?
I think you should do football first
Yeah,
because
I
there's
would
no
agree.
cheerleading without football.
Yeah, those two are
Sorry.
connected.
So let's do cheer and football.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we have fall football for as long as it lasts.
I'll second that.
Motion by Bill, second by Julie. Further discussion? No further discussion.
Actually, I do want to further discuss. I really think that a good point was made, and they're already working on football.
They had contact days this summer. Yeah. So is soccer, and most of our sports. So they had contact days this summer. A group of the BFS was mainly football players who were in the weight room and doing things. Yep.
Yeah, I don't see how it's safe at all. So.
You don't see what? I'm sorry.
I'm on the opposite side of Bill and Julie. I don't see it safe at all. I don't see it being safe at all. Okay, any further discussion? Start with myself, I vote no. Barb?
No.
Angie?
No.
Shelley?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Stephen?
No.
And Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's 4-3, so football will be moved to the spring.
No.
They gotta make a
Well,
motion.
We gotta make a motion
Gotta
for
make
that.
a motion.
That was just, it won't be in the fall. So I'll make a motion that we move the football to the
And
spring, sorry,
And cheer.
football and cheer, thank you, to the spring WIA recommended season.
I'll second.
Who is that?
Barb.
Barb?
Barb. So motion by Stephen and second by Barb to move football to the spring.
And cheer.
And cheer.
And cheer, I apologize. They're connected, you told me they're connected. Any further discussion? I'll start with myself, yes. Barb?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes,
Shelley?
come back to me.
Julie?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
And Bill?
Yes.
And Shelley?
Yes.
Okay, passes 7-0. Football, I'm sure will be in the spring.
I do have a trivia question now that we've all voted. That means it is fully our intention to play that sport as we voted. In other words, football is in the spring, not, oh, gosh, we don't know. Football's in the spring.
Unless the numbers get worse and we make another vote to not do it.
Well, something we have not discussed is the rubric that tells us when we move from one model to another. And that's going to also impact any of these sports,
True.
even the ones in the fall.
I hear you, and Mr. Branning talked about it a little bit, but nobody wants to step out and decide what percentage of our athletes would have to test positive in order to stop the sport.
Much bigger than that. It's all kinds of factors have to be decided. And it's going to be up to us. If no one's going to give us that guidance, then we have to come up with that guidance.
But I think, Bill, the reason why we're all comfortable even saying yes at all to spring sports is because, as I said earlier, and several other people have reiterated, we do believe we will know more information and we will either be more comfortable with this pandemic or less comfortable. And I think we all sit here believing that we will feel better come later in the fall because we will have more knowledge. I don't think it will be gone by any means, but if we have quicker testing, if we have more knowledge how to treat, if we find out that students don't cause rapid breakouts, then I feel comfortable that our spring vote is probably going to hold true.
I understand what you're saying, and as far as every day we take forward, or if you want to do 5-year blocks, we're always smarter 5 years forward than we were.
Yep.
The other thing is this. We know that this started last December. And if there is such a thing as a normal pandemic, they last 12 to 15 months. So, yes, I know.
So the length of the pandemic depends on how people react to it. So if people don't social distance and don't wear masks and they keep gathering, that extends the pandemic. If people react in a positive way, then that shortens the pandemic.
It's kind of funny when you say that out loud because think about our student athletes and how they might not now change their perception of whether or not to social distance or not. Just saying it. Mr. Brannig stated earlier that some students don't want to be, what do you call it?
The contact tracing?
Yeah, they don't want to deal with the contract tracing because
Be snitches.
there it is.
Yep. Snitches.
But it's not just the students, it's the parents, it's the grandparents, it's the people coming in from other states and going to other states, the people going on vacation. It's testing at a federal level, it's testing at a state level, all of that has to do with how long it lasts.
I understand, but you're asking us to make an educated guess on Lodi and our students, and we're doing the best we can.
Right.
Yep, we're doing the best we can.
We're doing the best we can. So are there any other sports that we missed?
I don't know. It's done with co-curricular. So thank you. Thanks to the high school administrative team for all their work and energy they put into that in their presentation. And thanks to the board for that lengthy discussion. I know that was not an easy decision on any of those. And move forward with that guidance.
But at some time, we do have to get together and discuss the rubric. We have to have rubrics in place.
Well, as I said, I was hoping those were gonna come with the DHS, and that we found out today that's not gonna happen. So yes, we're gonna have to put those together for not only athletics, but for school in general. I know I reached out to a couple area schools about the possibility of doing that in a cohort with some other schools maybe. But again, everybody has their own local data they wanna look at, and so we will definitely start looking at that more in depth.
Just think of how much smarter we're gonna be at our regular board meeting in September when other schools or superintendents have adjusted to, oh, Lodi's doing this, or this group is doing this. It's a joke, really, come on.
I got you.
But we should put that on the agenda, that should be an agenda item, for sure.
Okay.
When,
I will put it on there.
Okay.
do we have that kind of time? Like, when are the first competitions for some of these sports?
No, well, again, you're talking, we're gonna have to put some things together to look at even before that, but I mean, we'll bring it here. Most of them, they will start, like cross-country will start next week, and we'll have to look at if we're doing only single-team events and work through that, but that's the guidance, that's the next step. That's the guidance that the high school needs to, okay, let's put guidance of who we can go compete against, what that's gonna look like, how are we gonna do spectators, and we're only focusing on really two sports right now, tennis and cross-country. And then, but then also looking at rubrics like what's it gonna mean when you're gonna have to, you know, how many athletes have to test positive before you shut a sport down? You know, and is it different between this sport and that sport, or if it's the same for all sports?
And that's not, you don't need us to approve that, that's something you guys.
No,
need
I
to
think that's
decide.
something we can do. I can bring it to the next board meeting and we can have a conversation about it, but I think we need to start stepping forward and having that internal discussion, right? I wanna make you aware of it. But I don't think it's not in your realm to create that. That's our role to
No,
try
I
to
didn't
create
want to
that.
create it, I just didn't know if we needed to.
Well, you know.
I want you to look at it,
We're all
approve it.
Well, I wanna
available
see it, I
for
just didn't know if
special
we could do it.
meetings
Yeah,
as
I know.
needed.
I just don't,
Pandemic,
yeah,
so.
if we need to pull together, we will, but we will
Right.
put something together.
No, that's what I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah,
like,
no,
that
sorry,
we
I
don't-
guess I didn't
we can't
understand.
wait
No, we
for
don't
that
need to,
until-
we don't need to have a special meeting to put that together. We're gonna, we'll wanna have you, especially for, again, we're looking at two sports, so we can put that together for two sports. Whatever we decide for school, I would definitely want you guys to stamp your approval that this is, that's what we're gonna do for schools. We're not gonna change how we're gonna do schools before the September board meeting, right? We are set and locked in how we are gonna start school and moving forward. But then we can have some ideas of how we would take that next step.
Are we going to talk, wait, are we done with this subject or no?
We are
I might
done
have
with
interrupted in the middle.
co-curriculars, yes. We have a couple more agenda items.
Go ahead, yep.
Okay? So, just to make it clear, then, I'm not interested at all in coming up with a rubric and being the first one to have a rubric. It's just that no one's giving us that guidance. Eventually, we're gonna have to do it.
Yeah, no, Adam,
Maybe we're the first ones to have a rubric.
I agree with you, Adam, and again, I'm sure that's something that will come out. Dane County, I will believe, will come out with a rubric tomorrow. We will look at Sauk County has some things that they're looking at. We'll look at Jefferson County plan that I share with you. We will absolutely try to harvest some of the best ideas that are out there. We're just not gonna create it on our own. We're gonna look at what's out there. We will also try to reach out to Sauk Prairie Healthcare and ask them for some assistance as well. To try to get more local guidance, and we'll reach out to Columbia County as well. And so we will, in some of our local school districts. And so yeah, we have some ideas. Like I shared an idea with you previously, and it'll be something similar to that. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
403, intermittent expanded family medical leave act.
I'm gonna turn this over to Mr. Richter.
Yep, so the Expanded Family Medical Leave Act incorporates childcare for individuals or families who have loss of daycare due to a school or a childcare closure or unavailability. Federal guidance has said that they will allow employers to determine if a mandate for continuous, that means every day that it would be full days, and consecutive or intermittent. So if somebody on staff could get a a child care for 2 of the 4 days or whatnot, and they could teach for 2 of the 4 days. That would be an intermittent for a length of time. They would get 60 days. Those of you that had FMLA know kind of what I'm talking about. Our recommendation is intermittent, and so we would be asking for a motion to allow intermittent expanded FMLA Act.
I'll make a motion to allow school district of Lodi employees who qualify for EFMLA to use intermittent leave.
Shelley Peril, second.
So a motion by Stephen and a second by Shelley. Is there any further discussion on it? Okay, take a roll call vote. Bill?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
And Ann says yes, passes 7-0. Is there anything else on that agenda item that you need? Is that it?
It's the next agenda item.
Okay, quickly.
We should go to the next agenda item. It's that same, the memo covered both of them.
Got it.
Sick leave.
Sick leave.
So I'll make a motion to allow school district of Lodi employees who qualify for EFMLA and EPSLA to use sick leave for care of a child whose school or child care providers are closed or are unavailable due to COVID-19.
I'll second. Angie.
Stephen made a motion, seconded by Angie. Is there any further discussion? Take a roll call vote. Started myself, Adam, yes. Barb?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And Bill?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Do we need to go to closed session? I thought we had a closed session.
We do need to go to closed session.
I think we need a potty break.
Yeah,
I'll make
go
a
to closed-
motion,
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 1985 1C and F to consider employment, compensation, and performance evaluation data of district employees over which the board exercises responsibility, and to consider financial, medical, social, or personal histories and disciplinary data of specific persons which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data.
I'll second Shelley.
Motion by Stephen and a second by Shelley. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Bill?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
And Adam says yes. Take a 6-minute break. Be back at 9:15.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's 9:09, so 9:15.